So we're just going to chat.
Yeah, it's fine.
Hey, everybody. Sorry for the late start. Justin is having mic cable issues, and I was running up against a clock that was going to delete my Facebook stream. So instead of having a deleted Facebook stream, we started without him. Although the podcast hasn't started yet. It's just our live stream. Welcome. Ow. Ow. I kind of
What's happening there?
trying to take off my sweater, and I guess I did it with verve, and I smacked my hand against my space heater that I have next to me.
Who's Verve and why is he smacking you? That's what I want to know.
Verve. Verve.
Oh, Verve. It's like
Eastern
Ernest.
time zone. Yeah, the sun has been down in Portland for hours. Let's get this mic up a little bit more. There we go. In my face. Oh, here comes Justin. I see him. He's coming back. Let's see if the microphone is fixed. Add to stream. We are live right now, Justin, because of things. But we're not podcasting yet. So tell us your woes.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to need a minute because everything broke.
Oh,
Everything
no.
just broke.
Oh, no.
So, jiggly cable, right? Not sitting in place right. So I need to connect a USB mic.
Okay.
Not a problem. That's the thing.
You've done it before.
So I moved the computer back, the desktop back, to plug it into the front so it'll reach the cord. In the back of the desktop was this handy little dandy Wi-Fi device, USB stuck in there, which then hit something in the back and bent and broke the internet for the desktop. And so then I pulled that all out and then realized I had to start all over. And then dragging the thing out almost broke the power source for this cable, bent it. Think like smashed the thing back into place and it's working. But that was like the most expensive, annoying few minutes of, and all my stories are, and somehow I lost the video feed to the other computer where all the stories are. So give me just a minute.
We'll have to give you a minute. Okay. We can give you a minute.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute myself just because we want to keep everything radio friendly.
That's right. Mute yourself, and then if you get yourself back, come back. Wait, yeah, he's muted. Okay, good. Ooh, there he goes down below. Everyone, if you're jumping in right now, this is This Week in Science podcast live stream, and Justin is experiencing some technical difficulties with his computer that he is fixing at the moment. So we are going to just kind of hang out and chat, and I do want to talk a little bit about, and I mean, it's a great moment as any. We are in the first show of the last month of 2020. And I feel like, Blair, you and I should get a newsletter out for the holidays.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd like to plan on that.
Okay.
We have this show, next week's show, and then the show on the 16th. So we have 3 shows, and then the 23rd in our calendar is a night off. But I think it'll be a nice night off for not to have an official podcast. But I would like to try and plan a TWISmas stream if people are up for that, where we can try to get together and enjoy the holidays, talk science, just for a little bit, not have it be an official show, but get to have some holiday fun live online. So we keep up the stream, but I don't have to edit anything the next day.
Yeah.
Which would be nice. I see Brian Dunning over on Facebook. Hey, number 1. You're the only one. You are the one and only, apparently. But there are other places. I see we've got MTG Meth, Manage Meth. I have not seen Microsoft's new project. Nope. Have not. Over on Twitch, on the TWIS Science channel over on Twitch. Gypsy, yeah, there's Heyo. Got some names over there. Who else is here? We got Kevin Jones over, Rod Hagland, Gorov, Paul Disney over in the YouTube. We also have Hot Rod, Shoe Brew, Duct Tape. Is this the duct tape episode? Is that what we're finding out for Justin?
Yes. Yeah.
The show will go on. Oh, I still haven't given tonight's show the title. So let's vote on a title. But I think if everyone gets their little thinking caps on for our Twistmas show, if you have thoughts and ideas of fun things we could do as a live stream group, let me know, because I think that would be a lot of fun. Maybe we can do something where we invite people who are regulars to join us on the stream.
We could also like play games too.
Oh, you're gonna take us back to Among Us, aren't you?
No,
we're gonna play more games.
I don't really need to do that again, but I have discovered some other things that you can do via like video chat to play games.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know, and people could submit questions if they wanted to me, and I could make another trivia game.
Well, we could have a trivia night. Mm-hmm. That would be fun.
Yeah,
not a TWIS trivia, but a science.
I don't want to write all of the questions, so other people have to submit some questions to me.
Yeah, I'm happy to come up with stuff like that. I think that would be I think a trivia night would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Oh, the advent of science. That's a good title for the show. Blair's idea was also, Blair had 2 ideas. So we have three title possibilities. Let's say number 1 is the advent of science.
That is a good one.
Number 2 was all I want for Twistmas is a vaccine.
Yeah.
Number 3 is I saw mommy
vaccinating Santa
Claus. So let me vote right now, 1, 2, or 3 in the chat room, and let me know which title you prefer, and that will be the title for the show tonight. Ooh, video chat from Thunder Beaver. Okay, I see a 3 from Flying Out, 3 from Cord, Shoe Brew, Noodles, Dave Shorty. Okay, so our web chat room is voting all 3 so far. Oh, I see a 3 from Brian Dunning over on Facebook. Fada voting number 1, of course. Yes, that was the one that you came up with. Kevin Jones with 3. Oh, we could all play musical instruments for Christmas. We could play some Christmas music.
How about I bake something live?
Bake something. Oh, that's good, because that's great. If I were to do that, I'd have to run upstairs and run downstairs. Yeah. Justin is unmuted.
If I'm not presenting science news, then I could do it on like my little iPad. I could just join from the iPad, right? And then I could take you to the kitchen with me. And I could bake something. I could prep ahead of time and bake something. That'd be pretty fun.
It would be. Okay.
Decide what I'd want to make though. So there's soft gingerbread, which is really unusual and delicious.
I could decorate cookies down here. I could bring Kai. We could have Kai down here and we could decorate cookies.
That's very fun.
While we're on air.
I could also so my workplace is doing a holiday recipe exchange, which is very cute. And I of course
I love this title.
Put the animal treat recipe, the dog biscuit recipe in.
Of course.
If you've been baking and you've been baking and you're like, I can't bake more cookies, I'll eat them all. It's COVID. I can't give them out.
Animal treats.
Now you can make animal treats, which, there's still humans that'll eat my animal treats, but it's much harder to binge eat them because they're not super sweet.
I'm not.
All right. So I'm going to be running
treats.
Blind.
Blind? What do you mean blind?
Pretty much. I'm just going to have to pull the stories from the show notes because apparently not only did Not only did that little Wi-Fi module break, but the HDMI connector busted.
Your
too.
HDMI connector? Oh my goodness!
Everything in the back.
How hard did you push that computer back?
Well, so it's not even so much. It's hard to explain. The computer fits like on the shelf, and I guess the wires are sticking out behind this. It just barely fits. So when I turned it, pulled it out, everything jammed up against the thing and twisted.
Oh.
Yeah. So
that's not good.
I have a big paperweight here now. Okay.
Do you have a microphone? Your microphone works.
Yeah, it's plugged into a laptop. The desktop, I don't even know if I can use it now. I think it's the port in the back because I switched cables. It's not the cable. I think the port itself got janky. But yeah, I have to do something because I have a lot of. Anyway, let's do a show.
You got a laptop? You can do it, yeah.
Yeah,
You've
now.
Done laptop work before.
Yeah, right now. Honestly, right now, the show is the secondary thing that I'm worried about. The show can go on. I'm ready for that.
You're ready for that. I'm ready for that. Are we ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Are you good to go, Justin? Do you need to adjust anything else for us to do the show?
Just need to pull up the show.
Okay. Get up the show rundown. Dun, 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 dun. I'm so sorry.
It happened in, a minute and a half. That was so annoying.
Technical difficulties.
Eats a fine.
I should have some
have a drop for technical difficulties.
Yeah. Or like we could have like a cover with like the whistled music.
Yeah.
Some elevator music while we're
And so it's back to the
repairing.
Back to the Chromebook. You guys should start the show. I'm gonna reboot this.
I can't start the show because then you're not gonna be here to do the disclaimer. Justin! Oh, I see Johnny Blind Man is listening, and we are having another late start. I know it's late for you. I'm sorry that we have a late start tonight, everyone. He's rebooting. He's getting it going. He does not look happy. But I wouldn't be happy either with that. Yeah. But maybe it's not as bad as it seems, and further investigation upon the daylight will be instructive. Perhaps. This is what we do with the live showing, with everybody doing our own IT work, right?
He says start without me. Should I just read his disclaimer?
No, what are we going to do? Start without you, without the disclaimer. It's not the same.
I know.
It's not the same. But it's good because right now I have the family over my head. Let's see. No worries. It's not like I have to fit in the network's time slot. That's exactly right, Shubrew. Independent podcasting, live streaming on the internets. This is how we make the bacon? No, I don't know if that fits. Cables are 98% of the problem, Kevin Unique. Welp. Normally the podcasts and the setups work, but that is sometimes the explosions happen right before the podcast starts.
Yeah.
Usually pretty good.
Yeah. We often join the stream at like 10 till. We have already set up all of our own stuff before that. So yeah, I mean, I sit down at the computer at 7:15.
Yeah.
So it's definitely... Sometimes stuff just happens right when you're supposed to go live. It's happened to me too, that everything is fine, and then all of a sudden it's like, your mic's not working.
How'd that
Okay.
happen?
Oh, it won't recognize your camera. What?
Fix it.
Oh, your computer just shut down. Type.
Right, Shoe Brew. If things worked all the time, IT peeps would not have a career. If it were that easy. It's not easy. Yes, we can have Blair read it. I can even have Justin read it again after the show, but we can just get it started with Blair reading it. Another thing I also want to think, I have so many ideas in my head. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, let's just get started then, Blair, shall we?
Yes, I already don't understand the first sentence of this thing, and I'm just
it's not
I'm
yours.
gonna improv it. I'm gonna make it make sense.
Okay, I was hoping Justin would come back if we just fudged it just a little bit, but not quite yet. So let us begin in a 3, a 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 802, recorded on Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. I saw Mommy vaccinating Santa Claus. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on This Week in Science, we will fill your head with folding, wiping, and democracy for animals. But first...
Disclaimer. This isn't Justin. Justin will be back later, so I'm reading his word. Disclaimer. With all the threats on the global stage these days, it is time that we turn to science for solutions. But what is science? Some people say lots of things that aren't worth 2 cents. So we will ignore what some people say for the moment and see what scientists have said about science. Because according to Galileo, science is something in which, quote, the authority of 1,000 is not worth the humble reasoning of a single individual. The good thing about it, says Neil deGrasse Tyson, is, quote, that it's true whether or not you believe in it. Science, quote, is nothing more than a refinement of everyday thinking, says Albert Einstein. And science, quote, is a way of thinking much more than it is a body of knowledge, says Carl Sagan. Science, quote, gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom, says Isaac Asimov. Okay, that last one isn't a science, but he's spot on considering how little wisdom is used in concert with science these days. And these days, the words of Marie Curie may be the most prescient of all. Quote, nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. So we invite you to do just that with us. Understand more and fear less here on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki.
And good science to you too, Blair. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again. Justin should be joining us if he can. He's having some technical difficulties and will hopefully be with us soon. But let us get this show on the road. So much science. There's so much good stuff to talk about this week. I have stories about predicting protein folding, plant memory wipes, and some biological freshness. The fresh maker. What's in the animal corner, Blair?
Smelly corals. I have flying crabs.
Crabs?
And democratic vulturine guinea fowl.
Wait, what?
Just birds in Africa that eat dead stuff. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later.
Okay.
But democratic birds. It's fine.
Bird, avian democracy. Even the birds can do it.
Perhaps better than us. Stay tuned.
I was going to say something like that, but I was biting my tongue with it. You heard that heavy pause. That was a physical tongue biting.
You'll have to hear the science to choose for yourself.
Yeah. Justin has a whole lot of stories too. Hopefully he will get here to tell them to us. But let's jump into the show. I want to remind you that subscribing to TWIS is pretty easy. Head over to your favorite podcasting platform and look for This Week in Science. We are most likely there. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, and now on Twitch at TWIS Science. But you look for This Week in Science pretty much anywhere, and you will find us. You can also head over to twis.org to find information about the show. All right. We will now move on to the science. And take a quick break because Justin's here, so let's check his audio.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, okay. Tap that mic. Boom, boom. Okay,
Perfect.
good. You're good. You're
have
here.
Audio. Yes.
You're here. Do you have
Did
stories?
not think I was gonna make it for a minute, but yes, now things seem to be working better.
Yay. Happy times. Okay. I'm always happier when all three of us are here.
I just saw the title of the show. That's hilarious.
It's good. Okay. I can edit you in. So let's say we'll do a quick little cut of what your stories are for the show tonight.
Okay, as soon as I'm allowed to scroll. This thing. Man. All right, Santa, if you're listening, I need a better system.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Very well. Okay.
Let's see. Okay, is this the I've got? Is that where we're starting?
Yep. Yeah. We already said what ours are, so I just need you to tell me what your stories are. What did you
Just
bring,
working on it.
Justin?
I've got.
What did you bring, Justin?
I can't see it. I mean, I know what I got. I've got asteroid smashing, flooding the future with more floods.
Oh, geez.
What's killing killer whales and solar crystals.
Ooh, we can get new agey, huh?
Crystals, huh?
Crystals.
Which crystal kills COVID?
None of them.
No? Really?
No.
Okay.
All right, let's dive into the science now. I want to talk about protein folding. Yes. This week, a big announcement came out of Google. Google's? No, Google. Google's DeepMind AI endeavor. Their AI software, AlphaFold, just pretty much won the pack. It got best of show at a biennial event called CASP. It's short for Critical Assessment of Structure Prediction. It's a protein structure prediction challenge that has been held for several years now. And over the years, all of the AI programs that have been involved in and entered into the challenge trying to develop programs that can use artificial intelligence or any methods really to be able to predict the structures of proteins they've all worked at like 40-50% accuracy, which is as good as chance. It's like as good or less good than guessing. They haven't really been that great. And then last year AlphaFold started pulling ahead of the pack, and this year in the challenge, they hit 90% accuracy, which is the threshold for really accurate protein structure prediction. And this is something that Folding at Home has used. We've talked for years about Foldit. Folding at Home uses distributed processing power from people's computers to run all of the possible structures that proteins could have to see which ones work, whereas Foldit uses human pattern recognition to be able to determine the structures of these proteins. Essentially, what the artificial intelligence AlphaFold does is it's machine learning. It's been trained on basic structures and things that are known to work and predictive. So you have a certain amino acid sequence. We know that it turns into this conformation in this situation, a different conformation in a slightly different situation. And putting it all together, they were able to really boost using machine learning as their strategy to get to a point where the algorithms are doing as good as folding at home, as good as human pattern recognition, but doing it faster. So instead of months to years to determine protein structures, it's a matter of days. So it's very exciting. This isn't something that's going to be like every lab is going to have it and AlphaFold is going to determine all the protein structures tomorrow. This is something that is a technological step forward. It has a lot of potential to change the direction of biotechnology, drug manufacturing, drug identification, even synthetic biology. It has a real potential to affect medicine and therapies moving forward, but it's still going to take some time to get there. But it's a huge, huge advancement, and I think very exciting.
It reminds me of how to crack a genome used to take years and a building full of computers, and now it's something that can be done pretty much in any lab with a very simple computer. So it's definitely, I see kind of similar shadows of that here, that this is something that could, in not a terribly long amount of time, that technology could potentially be streamlined and distributed.
Yep. Yeah, it could be very streamlined. I mean, for it to speed up detection and delivery, I mean, it just, I think it's very exciting. We've come a long way, baby. Yeah. Justin, do you want to talk about smashing asteroids? Smashing, darling.
One Friday evening, 1992, a football-sized meteorite weighing about 30 pounds ended its 150 million mile journey in the trunk of a Chevy Malibu in Peekskill, New York, which is about 50 miles north of New York City. That sleepy little town. This came from far, far, far away in space and smashed this poor person's car. Now, 30 years later, that car has toured the world, along with the meteorite that was in it. And they've taken a new look. This is a new analysis of that same meteorite, as well as 17 others by researchers at University of Texas, Austin, University of Tennessee, Knoxville as well. They got now a new hypothesis on how the asteroids formed in the early universe. Or not the early solar system, sorry. So previously, it is thought that the meteorites these asteroids were all very hot, and then they cooled with this sort of layered cooling going in and in and in. And that was based off of looking at the rates of cooling. And those studies then, though, were only capable of measuring cooling rates from temperatures around 500 degrees Celsius and down. This is Nick Daggert, who is an assistant professor at University of Tennessee. He realized that there's a method that they have there that they were using called rare earth element into pyroxene thermometer. And he decided to apply it to space rocks. Now, the nice thing about this system is that it could do up to 1,400 degrees Celsius cooling and down. And what they found then was that not all of these fragments have cooled at the same rate. They found, so from 900 degrees Celsius down to 500, cooling rates were 1,000 to 1,000,000 times faster than they cooled at the lower temperatures. So these are, we're finding these are fragments from all these different asteroids or meteorites that have landed on the Earth that have these sort of drastically different cooling times over these two periods. What would make something cool at 1,000 million times faster at the higher temperatures than at the lower temperatures? And the only way they've been able to make sense of it is if we started with a bunch of big asteroids that just kept smashing into each other and breaking apart and then recollecting. Because it turns out once they recollect, even though those smaller ones will cool faster, once they then are recombined again, they slow down their cooling because they sort of create a blanket with lots of little air pockets, and it creates a sort of porous asteroid in the very beginning, which actually tremendously slows down the new recombined asteroid's ability to cool down. So instead of having sort of a peaceful early solar system where stuff was just hot and then slowly cooled down and then occasionally broke apart, what we're finding is that everything was very, very hot and smashing into each other, breaking all apart and then coming back together and breaking apart and coming back together again. So new insights into how our early solar system formed. It was very violent.
Yeah, it sounds like it was super dynamic. There was a lot going on. And I love that it comes from this just looking at, it's like, oh, there's this weird discrepancy. Like these temperatures, why did it cool down differently? Because it doesn't make any sense. And that's where the science questioning happens. And it's the how. Try to explain it. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah, and also, just being able to see that cooling at what the cooling took place at those higher temperature ranges with new instrumentation applied, gave them the rest of the data that they were missing in the first go round.
Very, very cool. So much data. Keep looking for it. Blair, tell me about those coral reefs. How they doing? Are you?
They're doing okay.
What was that?
This is a study from the University of Technology.
Do a line of coral?
Sydney.
What happened?
No, I'm talking about how corals smell. Do you know how corals smell? Not how they physically smell, but how do they smell?
They don't have noses.
No, not how do they smell. How do they smell? Like, do they smell like hamburgers?
They probably smell like seaweed.
Do they smell like seaweed? That's a good question. Well, we know that every organism releases a distinct mix of volatile gases that makes up their smell. And a new study tells us that the smell of coral can actually tell us quite a bit about their health. So you can tell based on smell, based on the gases that are being released by an organism, how they cope with stress, and also later how those same gases, those self-same gases, can influence atmospheric processes. If you're talking about coral, right? And so this is, of course, the first study to study the smell of coral and whether it varies from when they're healthy to when they're stressed. And they looked all over the southern Great Barrier Reef, and they looked at the abundance and the diversity of gas emissions. And the diversity actually fell significantly during heat stress. So I don't know if that means that they were less smelly in general, probably, or if there's a particular change in their smell. They're not telling us exactly about that. But they are telling us that the abundance and chemical diversity of the gases decreased with stress. But so the real sciencey stuff behind that is that the functional potential of the microbiome of the coral changes when they're stressed out. And that's really what this is about, is that that might impact their ability to cope with increasing temperatures. So there's signaling going on, potentially. So it's possible that corals are also releasing these smells to other organisms around them. It's possible it's affecting grazing fish. It's possible it's affecting algae. It's possible it's affecting all sorts of things. But the next kind of step is to figure out really what is the smell of a coral that is vulnerable.
Yeah, what's it smell when it's healthy? What's it smell when it's vulnerable? What's it smell when it is diseased? I mean, you can always tell when something's diseased. It smells like it's rotting. But
Yeah. But stressed, maybe that's something else. And then, of course, I can't help but wonder, do we give off a stress smell? I think that we do, right? I think we've talked about that in the show, that there's definitely, I mean, even last week we were talking about rats, right? They give off a smell that has to do with how they're feeling, if they're feeling supported or if they're feeling cooperative or all those sorts of things. So there's lots that goes into that, but how a coral smells. Not only something you probably didn't wonder, how does coral smell, but also it's underwater. So you probably don't think a lot about that for that reason either. But
that's what I mean. There have to be. You're just in a thicker fluid than air. So there's if you're a fish or if you're an organism, you're still swimming in that sea of their odorants of molecules that would smell if they came in contact with an organ for smelling.
I'm sure we could smell coral underwater if we wanted to. Just the problem is we drown first.
Yeah.
So that's why it feels foreign.
You can smell the roses, but don't smell the corals.
Yeah, you'll die.
Okay. You'll die. Oh, dear. Speaking of corals, nope, not speaking of corals. Let's talk about plants. Yes. From the University of Warwick, we have researchers who are looking at plant reproduction and looking at proteins that are involved in how plants reproduce and the memories that they hold on to. And we've talked before about this idea of plant memory, that some experiences during a plant's life do change the genome of the plant through epigenetic manipulations. And so there are proteins that are involved in these epigenetic manipulations, the histones and the methyl groups that get added to the genome. And when they get added, they reduce the adaptive potential of that genome, but they make it possible for the plant who has experienced a certain situation, stressful, cold, lack of water potentially, that maybe that plant can survive a little bit better because it's created these epigenetic adaptations to allow it to survive better. However, when it passes those adaptations on, if they get passed on to the offspring and the offspring hold on to them, then they can reduce the adaptability of the offspring because, like I said, they're limiting the way that the DNA can be used. And so these researchers found out that there are a couple of protein molecules that they specifically looked at Arabidopsis, which is a model plant in the plant biology world. They looked at a couple of proteins, histone demethylases. Demethylases, that's an enzyme that takes methyl groups away. So what these proteins do is they wipe the memory of plants. During sexual reproduction, these proteins become active and get rid of the epigenetic markers that were produced in the parent generation so that the offspring have a clean slate and they can have all the adaptability to situations that they need. And this may explain why sometimes we do see memory getting passed down from generation to generation through these genetic controls, because sometimes the demethylases don't work properly, but sometimes they do. And so these memories don't get passed on all the time. I don't know. It's another interesting aspect of plant reproduction, and it probably has a pretty big impact on mutations that potentially occur and the genome as it evolves down multiple generations. When we think about how things go from experience into being genetic instinct, you're basically changing the adaptive potential of the genome. Yeah. So anyway, plants. This is an eLife. It's an open access journal, and yes, plants. They have a memory wiping device in their genome. Want to talk about the water, Justin? I don't want any more water. But
Yeah.
what are we getting?
How high's the water, mama? 4 feet high and rising. It's actually probably could even be more than that. So, Superstorm Sandy, if we recall, that was back a while ago, hit New York region, causing an estimated 74.1 billion with a B, dollars with a D in damages. It was the 4th costliest hurricane behind Katrina and Harvey and Maria, which were both in 17. Katrina in 2005. So this is researchers at Stevens Institute of Technology, and they found that the 100-year and 500-year flood levels could become regular occurrences for the tens of thousands of homes surrounding Jamaica Bay, New York, by the end of the century. Although I kind of assume at that point, most of those people who are living in that part of New York will be Midwesterners by the end of the century, because they'll just get sick of the flooding.
Yeah.
Or we'll have evolved gills and become
I don't
merpeople.
think that's going to happen that quickly. I think people will move first. Yeah.
I don't know, technology, you know.
I mean, if they keep trying
we're
to
talking
grow
about,
corals, maybe they'll figure it out.
you know, 100 years from now, 100 years ago, we didn't have like the car or the television yet. You know, 100 years is going to be quite amazing. We might get to merpeople. This is a study was led by Reza Marsouli, who is the assistant professor of civil, environmental, and ocean engineering at Stevens Institute, and somebody whose name you want to use both first and last every time. Reza Marsouli. That's a great name. But he's been looking at the extent of how coastal flooding will increase in the future across the New York region, and therefore you can also use his modeling system for other regions, because it's basically the modeling system that they have built here. This is quoting Reza Marsouli. While this study was specific to Jamaica Bay, it shows how drastic and costly of an impact that climate change will make. They have published this in the November 26th issue of Climactic Change. The framework we used for this study can be replicated to demonstrate how flooding in other regions will look by the end of the century to help them mitigate risk and best protect communities and assist in impacted areas. So, Marsouli and Lin, who's Lin? Lin is co-author, Ning Lin from Princeton University. They conduct these high-resolution simulations for different scenarios to find the probability of different flood levels being reached, assuming that emissions remain at the high level and do not get reversed. They studied how sea level rise and hurricane climatology change would impact the area, with storm surge, wave hazards, a little bit of the sea rise being involved. Marsouli and Lin found that the historical 100-year flood level, that's that big flood that happens once every 100 years. Mm-hmm. So not shared by every generation. It might even skip a generation between the times when it comes, right?
Yeah.
Found that would become a once every 9-year flood level.
9?
By mid-century.
2050.
By 2050.
9 years. Every 9. So once a decade. Than once a decade. It would over time be more than once a decade.
Yes. They found the one and then at the end, near the end of that century, starting around 2080 to 2100, it'll be a yearly event.
Wow.
It'll just be
every year,
the
just
weather.
flood. The weather. We just flood. This is what we do here.
But let me get this straight. Tackling climate change right now is too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But see, this is where the cognitive dissonance comes in, because
this is where wisdom,
they're not looking at future costs. They're looking at, well, it's just expensive now.
Yeah.
This is where the accumulated knowledge and the wisdom of society don't match up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right? So, but now Superstorm Sandy was not one of those once every 100 years. Superstorm Sandy was a once every 500
500, yeah.
type event. By mid-century, that would be what would only occur still once every 143 years. So, we don't even need to think about that one. That's so far off into the future. By the end of the century, it'll be a once every 4 year.
Right.
That's rapid acceleration. That's crazy. Wow.
The time to act is last week.
We are behind. We are just behind. So everybody, just know that at a certain, if you're in Jamaica Bay, other New Jersey, other areas, low-lying areas, Florida, Miami, you're going to have to move at some point. Your property is not going to be worth very much.
Yeah.
Science.
This is when we're talking about. Kevin Jones saying, "Buy the mountain, Justin." Yeah, we're gonna have to buy a mountain before too long. But this is one of those. If we, I've gotten a little flack in the past saying we should stop rebuilding. I think Haiti. It's always going to have devastating strength earthquakes that take place there, and you can retrofit all the buildings and do that, but you're still going to have issues.
It's not a fault. Yeah.
If you build next a community next to an active volcano, you should expect that there's going to be a disaster. These are not natural disasters at this point. Once we have the knowledge of what's going to occur in the future, and then you build and rebuild and reinvest and redo it again, these are man-made disasters at that point.
Yep.
We
can avoid things like this if we plan appropriately. If we take a long view and plan appropriately. Plan for 50 to 100 years from now and the every 4 year, 500 year floods. Oh, humans, why are we so ridiculous? Seriously. We're so ridiculous. Well, Justin likes to talk a lot about our bacteria and how that affects our brains. And people like to talk about whether bacteria are involved in so many different things. A cool study out this week looked at bacteria and how it affects our vitamin D levels. Bacteria in our guts. Researchers from the University of San Diego, California, San Diego, there we go, looked at men in their 70s and 80s and their microbiome and levels of vitamin D. The vitamin D that is normally measured when they're measuring vitamin D is inactive vitamin D. It's just vitamin D. It's a precursor to vitamin D. It's not doing anything except really sitting in your bloodstream. They wanted to know about active vitamin D. Active vitamin D is actually hormonally active. It is going and doing things. It's going and it can interact with your bones, your blood, your skin, all these things. And we don't normally measure it. And they ended up looking at gut bacteria, different levels of these different vitamin D metabolites in the blood, and determined that we've been looking at things in this really weird way. And first, not looking at active vitamin D could completely explain the discrepancies that we've seen in a lot of different studies about the effectiveness of vitamin D. That if it's just the precursor and not actually doing anything, then you could have high vitamin D levels. And yes, it could be related to good health or not, because it's the precursor. It's not actively doing anything. However, they found that your gut microbiome is involved in metabolizing active vitamin D. And people with these men with certain microbiomes were found to have higher active vitamin D levels than other individuals that didn't. And so what they think is going on is that the gut microbiome can determine your active vitamin D level, and then that determines what is actually going and doing stuff in your body. So if you don't have the right gut microbiome, you may not be metabolizing and turning into active vitamin D, all of the precursor vitamin D that you're taking in your supplements. And so you could have a lot of vitamin D in there, but your gut microbiome might not be helping out because you have the wrong gut microbiome because your gut's not healthy. And so you may not be getting the benefits of that vitamin D.
So that means, one, throw out all of the nutritional studies having to do with vitamins. And
well, we know vitamins are kind of
and well, no, they might not be. So this is what this is saying then, is that actually those who have shown to have incredible benefit from taking XYZ vitamin, although I could have used like B, C, D, I guess.
A, B, C, D. Yeah,
it could be any of them. Yes.
Right. But they actually work if you can convert them, and if you can't, then obviously they would have no effect, right? So you have to throw out the naysayer data as well as the positive data, find the correlation with the gut microbes, and then you've got a probiotic vitamin pill you have to take, which is like twice as big. But yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
It does, yeah. And the researcher says it seems like it doesn't matter how much vitamin D you get through sunlight or supplementation or how much your body can store. It matters how well your body is able to metabolize that into active vitamin D. And maybe that's what clinical trials need to measure in order to get a more accurate picture of the vitamin's role in health. And a different researcher says, in this case, maybe it's not how much vitamin D you supplement with, but how you encourage your body to use it. And the bacteria involved specifically produce butyrate, which is a beneficial fatty acid that helps maintain gut lining health. So it could be related to the gut lining. It could be related to the bacteria themselves. But if you've got bacteria that make butyrate, you're probably doing what needs to be done to your vitamin D.
How do we know? How do we know the chicken and egg here? Because there's part of me that wonders, like, do we know this particular type of bacteria? Is it something that's genetically linked? Is it something that is environmentally linked? Because the other thing I'm wondering is,
don't know.
Do you have more of this bacteria? I'm just throwing it out there because you got more sun as a kid, right? Like, is your body more used to taking in vitamin D? And so you develop a microbiome that can handle it. It's I always question too when there's vitamin D related studies in California.
Okay, so let me this is a very important point from this study, and I'm actually glad you asked this question. They looked at these men from across the United States. They had many of these individuals lived in San Diego. There were some who lived in New York City, some who lived up in Seattle. There are 6 cities around the United States, and they were all in good health. And so they just they did DNA, RNA sequencing to identify the bacteria in their stool. And then also they looked at the vitamin D metabolites. And so they were able to break it down. The men in San Diego got the most sun, and they also had the most precursor form of vitamin D, but they did not necessarily have the most active form of vitamin D, and that was bacterially linked.
Interesting.
So they were able to take location and sun exposure into account.
Good.
However,
I don't know if they did childhood sun exposure.
Yeah, right. That's a whole nother thing for sure. Yeah.
So however, then the next thing would be to do these were just men. Was the man in New York of Mediterranean descent, and was the man in San Diego of Scandinavian descent? Because that could if it has that genetic
genetics,
right? Then there might have been people who were. Or maybe it would be reversed. I don't know. But one who's like always gets plenty of sun D, and so maybe they don't work as hard because you always get the input. And then the other side is used to be. there's a lot of questions that need to get sussed out of this data. I'm still trying to figure out how getting D from the sun and then it travels to the gut still, what is...
Blood.
How does that...
Blood. Yes.
Blood? And that's interesting.
No, not necessarily. So the vitamin D doesn't necessarily go into your gut, but in your bloodstream, in the butyrate. So the vitamin D ends up in your blood. The butyrate could end up in your blood, and then different things combine, and then you have the metabolizing of the precursor into the active vitamin D. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in the gut. If you're taking a supplement, it might.
Well, yeah, but that was I would think that the sun exposure one wouldn't end up getting into the gut and getting converted though. It would have to have
probably not.
Thing.
It would just be in the blood. That it would, the conversion would happen in the blood. What? No. Why would it be useless?
Get converted by the gut bacteria, or is it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't get converted by the gut bacteria.
Right.
It's the gut bacteria.
So it never turns to butyrate.
We need to do this separately. We'll have a conversation about the chemical processes.
I got lost there for sure.
Yeah, the bacteria are involved in the butyrate processing, and they're linked to the levels of active vitamin D in the stool and in the blood. But they
so
don't
bacteria makes butyrate, says goodbye, go into the blood.
The bacteria are not necessarily breaking down the vitamin D itself.
The butyrate is interacting with the vitamin D.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not necessarily. And just before we go off into other topics that we love, I do want to take a moment to mourn Arecibo. I saw in our chat
last week
that who was it? Mike Shoemaker had said, "Rest in peace, Arecibo." This week, Arecibo's observatory crashed to the ground. It was not a planned crash. It was not a planned destruction, but the radio observatory is no more, unfortunately. And we will see where we go next with our radio astronomy, and whether
this all happened from a bad cable. A cable broke.
But that happened because of a hurricane, which it was
detailed.
Climate change.
The thing that crashed has been stuck hovering above this thing, rather unsecured, I guess, for this whole time. And then while they were doing, I guess they were going to repair it. They were like, it's no big deal. It's just panels and some metal and cable. And then the thing that was not secured a year later or so, however long it's been, collapsed and crashed. Yeah, it's done.
Yeah, so it's a sad day for Puerto Rico and for astronomy in Puerto Rico and for astronomers around the world who have made use of the Arecibo Observatory, iconic observatory. But there will be more science. We need radio observatories like Arecibo to tell us about the space around our planet. There's so much we need to learn, especially which of those objects out there are going to come smacking into us. Arecibo is involved in identifying those. I would like to have more of that identification, so let's put money there. Let's do that. If you just tuned in, this is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in a TWIS shirt or mug or other item of TWIS merchandise, head over to twis.org and click on our Zazzle store link to browse the store. There are lots of items there for sharing and caring as the holidays come through. Also, on the website, we have our TWIS calendar for 2021. So if you would like your 2021 TWIS calendar with original artwork by Blair, make sure you get your order in today.
That's amazing looking artwork.
It's beautiful. All right, time for the COVID update.
Yeah, we actually have good news this week, right?
Yeah, we do actually. Do have good news. So I'm going to start off with the bad news and then go to the good news.
Oh, sure.
Wait, I thought it was just all good news. What happened? I got taken away quick.
I didn't take anything away.
There's always bad news with COVID. Just we're excited to have some good this week.
Yes, we are. Researchers published this week in Nature Neuroscience from the Charité Universitätsmedizin Berlin on their research into how SARS-CoV-2 enters the brain through your nose.
It enters the brain?
Through your nose.
Wait,
That makes sense.
Is this just like the less bad news than the next story? Good news? Is this like going to be by comparison to the next story? That COVID goes into your brain?
Well, we have known for a while that some people lose their sense of smell when they are infected with COVID. Some people, things smell off or funny. Additional people have neurological defects, will have memory loss or slowness or fogginess. Your brain just isn't quite right. And it's not just a result of fatigue from the disease. Researchers have suggested that SARS-CoV-2 is actually getting into the nerves of the brain. And for this first time, the researchers produced electron microscope images of intact coronavirus particles inside the olfactory mucosa, so in the lining of your nose, and additionally, they followed it through the olfactory nerves and into the brain. And they found they found evidence of SARS-CoV-2. Yeah, the majority of the SARS-CoV-2 viral particles were found in the olfactory mucosa. So they get into you inhale the virus, it gets into the cells of your mucous membrane, and
hanging out in the snot locker.
That's right, and that's great. You want it to stay there, but unfortunately, if it's reproducing a lot there, infecting the cells and your mucosa can only do so much, and after a while, it can't block the invader anymore, and they're able to move up the nerves of the nose into regions of the brain. They did tissue samples and cell samples for SARS-CoV-2 genetic material and spike protein, and they were able to find, they found evidence of the virus in the medulla oblongata and the pons, the areas of the brain that are responsible for the control of breathing.
What?
Which is not good. That's another reason that the breathing becomes labored, isn't as easy in extreme.
What?
Yes.
It's a bad virus.
So
Virus.
the immune response is creating lung mucus to begin with. It's a respiratory disease to begin with. Mm-hmm. But in that, it's also somehow attracted to the brain center. And
it's also impacting your blood. So it's impacting your blood's ability to move oxygen around too. It's like, how's all the ways that I can suffocate you? Let's just tick them all off. It's not good. Yeah.
Doesn't sound. Guarp Sharma has the same question I do. How do viruses travel through nerves? Or they just fit? Small enough.
Nerves are cells, and if there is a receptor, then they will. The spike protein will end up attaching to the receptor and binding to the receptor and gaining entry to the cell. The particles will take over the neural machinery because it has the same machinery for reproducing DNA and RNA as other cells in the body. And so that machinery will be taken advantage of as well. And I think also in the nerves, you have long distance transport mechanisms, which may help move the virus through the nerves along the axons and the dendrites. They also think that the blood vessels are involved, and that so cerebrospinal fluid, blood vessels, all involved in carrying the virus from the nose into your brain.
Yeah, so this is a good time to remind everyone to cover your nose with your mask.
Yeah.
So another good reason to do that is to cover your nose with your mask.
That would be a great
You
idea.
don't want your nose hanging out.
Okay. I don't want to hear the next story. If that was the good news part.
No, that wasn't the good news. The good news is now.
The good news is now. Absolutely. Moderna reached its phase 3 vaccine trial and primary efficacy endpoints with 94.1% overall efficacy, it has reported. It applied for U.S. FDA emergency use authorization, and it expects expedited review of its data mid-December with the possibility of vaccines rolling out just before Christmas. By the 21st or 22nd, if the review goes well, it can be expected that Moderna vaccines will be available to frontline workers right before Christmas. If it works.
That's quick.
So this is very, very good news. From a press release, not from a study, although Moderna has stressed that they will be producing a peer-reviewed study for people to look at, that they are going to go through that entire process. They say that they had 30,000 participants, including 196 cases of COVID-19, of which 30 cases were severe. Vaccine efficacy against COVID-19 was 94.1% efficient. Efficacy against severe COVID-19 was 100%. So severe COVID-19 cases were only in the placebo group, not in the vaccinated groups. It continues to be generally well tolerated, no serious safety concerns to date, and it's exceeded 2 months of median follow-up post-vaccination as required for the emergency use authorization. They're expecting before Christmas, which is really, really quite exciting. They have the 196 COVID-19 cases included 33 older adults, 42 participants identifying as being from diverse communities, so they've got a broad group of people. The primary analysis from today was based on 196 cases, 185 of COVID-19 in the placebo group versus 11 in the vaccinated group, which is a significant difference. 30,000 people. It's not millions of people, but it's thousands of people, and that's very exciting. So it's very
in some countries,
positive
that's more
news.
people than have gotten the virus. So for some communities, that's a great sample size. Yeah.
Indeed. And in addition to this good news, Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, their mRNA vaccine, is under expedited review in the UK. So they are currently being reviewed, and based on the outcome of that decision, which could be any day now, distribution might start within the week. So the UK may have a vaccine in use within a week.
So I know I heard today on the news that that one, the Pfizer one in the UK, is going to be, someone asked how long they last and what the dose was like. That one's supposed to be a jab and then a jab 21 days later, which, I will just admit that's going to be more complicated to orchestrate.
All of them are 2 doses.
Yeah. So
all of them are 2 doses,
and is way harder to orchestrate.
Yeah.
How do you make sure people come back and get their second dose? How do you arrange for the scheduling behind it? It's a lot to figure out. And luckily, that's what people are doing right now in the United States. It was very encouraging to hear. They were like, we're way past the how do we keep this cold phase. We've got that figured out. What we're figuring out is who gets the vaccine when. And so that, I think, is the main thing that that people are focusing, the powers that be are focusing on for the next month or so until it's allowed to go out.
Yeah. Another big question is how long the immunity from these vaccines will last. And at this point, based on the trials, we don't know. We know that they have followed their patients, the people who have volunteered for the study, for 2 months. These vaccine trials have not been going on very long. We have started to see results from studies following people from up to 6 months after having had COVID itself, and are showing at least 6 months worth of immunity. to COVID in a lot of situations, most situations. So fingers crossed that the vaccines will give similar immunity if they work
And if they
the way
don't-
other vaccines do, at least a year.
Yeah,
Once
and
a
if
year
they-
you have to go.
Twice
I don't
because
know.
you need to get the booster still. But
Right, yeah.
the thing is, they don't really need to be any more than a 6-month effective. If we don't do a drunken, staggered walk of
But that's the
vaccinations.
problem.
Yeah.
No, I know. I mean, but what we're going to have this round is the drunken stagger,
Yeah.
right? So we are going to knock out people who can hopefully even catch and reproduce this virus. And by doing that, we can then, probably in the second year of doing this, go, okay, this October, we're going to get everybody. If we figured out if it only has 6 months, we can still work around it. Just need to get everybody within the same month to take it, so that those following months you have done essentially the same thing as just staying indoors for 2 months or 6 weeks or something.
Right.
Because that's what you just need to do. You just need to get everybody to stop transmitting it to each other. We're the vector. It's this virus isn't just going like, I'm gonna go down the street, knock on this door, go down the chimney. Go
No,
over to
it's
the
waiting
grocery
for you to
store,
go
get people
breathe
there.
on people.
It's not like blowing around in the wind. It's human vector. Humans are transmitting. Humans are picking this up, carrying it, and giving it to other humans. So aside from a full lockdown, this vaccination of the people who are going to be out, and I have no doubt that there's going to be a first responder first wave of this. The second wave of the vaccine is the one that starts to get curious, because our CEOs, first responders, are just wealthy people who are staying at home but want to go out and shop. Like, who's going to get the access to this? In the United States, because we don't have universal health care, we have a tiered system built into who has
Pay
what
for
kind
play.
of insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep. And it's what
gonna
your
be
state,
ugly.
it's not just your insurance, it's what your state is able to get from the federal government. The federal government has contracts with manufacturers. Those manufacturers are supplying certain amounts at certain times. They're going to make those lots available to the states. The states like California are probably making their own deals with manufacturers to get their own. You know, if you have enough money, they can get their own. And so states even are going to be uneven in that respect. And then from there, it goes to county level and how you actually start rolling it out at your pharmacies or at your doctor's office, or is it only at hospitals? Where are these vaccines and how do you get them? And it is a huge question right now there's an article in Stat right now by Helen Branswell that is Stat News. It's amazing. It's all about the last mile. And that, you know, we've talked about the last mile in cable and internet wires getting to the house before, but this is the last mile
or
of
access to banking loans.
Yeah, but this is the last mile in getting the vaccines to people. And it's going to be very interesting because most of us, we're sitting here talking about it, but we don't have a say in it. And, hopefully our elected government officials here in the United States are going to be doing the best planning possible to get it out to the people who need it first. I assume I am one of the last people who need it. I work at home. I don't, I'm not a frontline worker. I'm not somebody who needs it right away. But Brian needs it. He's working in an emergency room. Maybe the spouses.
So this is part of the thing I have not heard.
Right. How does
as
that
part
work?
of the narrative is what if a person who works in the ER lives with other people? Yes, I understand he might not be able to get it, but he might touch something in the hospital and then drive home and then touch me and then I can still get it. So like, just because you vaccinated that person Doesn't
It's
mean
it's a
everyone in their
lower
household is,
likelihood.
like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
definitely
It's a
lower.
lower
You should
likelihood,
definitely,
but it's
you should
still-
definitely tell him to wash his hands when he comes home. I'm
mean,
surprised he's not doing that. That's actually stunning. that he would not be
All right.
Ryan,
washing his
wash
hands.
your
coming
hands.
out of the
Okay.
hospital.
But still, it's part of the narrative I haven't heard, right? Is the households of essential workers. Because I do think that's part of the conversation. Just because, like, you know, there are schools in session in a lot of the country right now. So if you have kids at home where there's an essential worker, then that is a, you know, there's part of the conversation.
But then you're also, the essential workers are teachers, because they are
Right.
teaching the kids in the schools. The essential workers are bus drivers. The essential workers are at grocery stores. The essential workers, you know, there are so many levels of how this needs to roll out, and there are not enough doses for the immediate future. It's going to take time. And we just have to know that it will happen with time. If you want a vaccine, you will eventually get one. You just have to be careful until that happens.
That's
So
the
in the
highlight.
meantime,
Yeah.
that's the highlight. They are coming. They're not here today.
Yeah.
They will be here. The news is positive in that direction. So wear your mask for that last mile, everyone. That's what we got to do. We're in this for the marathon, everyone.
And as
Super
Justin
marathon.
so eloquently put last week, and I think it's very important that we keep talking about it, is that a vaccine doesn't heal you if you get COVID,
No.
right? No. It prevents you from getting infected. So that is part of the narrative that I think is really, really important to keep hammering, is it doesn't help you if you're sick. So, like, you have to stay healthy until you get that jab.
Stay healthy.
Well, yeah, what would be hilarious is if everybody realized that this is the last mile and all stayed at home for the next, like, 8 weeks, waiting to get the vaccine first. And then it turns out we didn't need it because people just stayed home for 2 months. We could have, by information level, May, we should have been done with this.
Yeah.
We should have been done with this by May and go, hey, remember how the beginning of the year was terrible, but it got better? Now everything's fine? Whew. That was a big scare. Boy.
Joint specialist on YouTube is saying his prediction is the NBA will be fully vaccinated before all healthcare workers. Oh, my goodness. They've got the money. They've got the visibility. They want everyone to watch basketball next spring.
I'm oddly would not be offended by that. Look,
I would.
So
I'm sorry. Nope.
Here's the thing about the NBA. Some of the first cases were NBA teams.
Yeah.
So so much of sports medicine, figuring out bubbles and pods, and all of these sort of things show the effectiveness of isolating and creating pods and bubbles. It was demonstrated, I think, very eloquently by the NBA to actually be able to pull off a system where they were able to continue playing games with people in close contact, breathing and sweating on each other, and not having a massive outbreak or super spreader event as a reason.
Then that means they don't need the vaccine.
They don't need the vaccine because they know how to do it without it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not that many individuals. Sports is the guinea pigs of so much sports medicine that we have. Like an Achilles tear, knee, hip, ankle injuries, all these sorts of things that we treat with such ease today, largely comes out of athletes getting, trying that new thing to keep them on the field another year and a half or whatever. So I don't know. I have a little bit of love for NFL players' bodies being the guinea pigs for so much sports medicine and so much that we've gleaned from that if you threw out, whatever 500, 600, 800 vaccines to that one group, I think that would be fine. I wouldn't really be super offended by that.
Okay. You wouldn't be.
Disagree.
I wouldn't be. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, they're frontline workers in a weird way all the time.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. They're athletes. They're athletes. Frontline workers and essential workers are healthcare. They're holding the infrastructure of society together. And
I know.
athletes
I'm just
are not.
saying so much of why
But I get what you're saying.
So much
I'm
of
saying
why
I don't
seniors
agree.
can get a double hip replacement and go home
Sports
that next
medicine,
day
I know.
is because of what we get. That it's sort of like why are we launching somebody to the moon?
Tangent. I don't
That's
care.
a slight tangent. I'll come back. Why do we launch somebody to the moon? Just to go there? That doesn't make sense. Look how much we learned by going to the moon that we've applied to other things. I think that's a weird thing that sports does in America.
But this is a vaccine. This has nothing to do with that aspect of that. It's not that. This is the vaccine. I want to give it to the people who really need it.
Yeah, they have to go to work and they're dying. So healthcare workers need the vaccine first.
Yes,
I think
teachers.
To me, it sounds like
healthcare workers,
defunding NASA because we have other priorities now. No, we have those priorities still.
That's such a false equivalency. Oh my God.
But it works. I have a string of logic that make sense.
In your brain. It's not making rational sense in my brain, but that's just me. This is This Week in Science. Do you want to help us grow? We'd like to grow. We want more people in here to hear our rants and to hear our stories and to enjoy science. Tell a friend about TWIS today. Let's get on back in here with a little section of the story. Of the story? No, of the show that I like to call Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair?
Yeah.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
How did the insect get its wings? Do either of you know?
Is this an Aesop fable?
Not quite.
Okay.
But it could be. It's something that has eluded scientists for very long. Where did the wings come from? What is the evolutionary origin of insect wings?
Can I guess? Can I guess?
Sure.
Cooling mechanism?
Okay, but what's the source?
Yeah,
Evolutionary.
that would be kind of a why, but where did it come
yeah, that's
from?
the why.
Yeah.
But where did this structure come from?
Oh, I have no idea.
How?
Right.
What's the how?
They were invertebrates. They didn't have wings, and then they had wings, and that's it. Right? Where did they come from? So the conventional wisdom for a really long time was that at about 300 million years ago, whatever it was a novel evolutionary item. And that is really, 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 really unusual when you look at evolutionary history. You look at embryonic development, you look at the genetics, and you find something that it comes from, right? So like our inner ear is based on a jawbone in fish, for example, right? So all these things have genetic and evolutionary origins. So the insects kind of eluded scientists for a very long time. And then there is a new theory that was published this week in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. It was a team from Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole. And they think they have settled the controversy. They looked at clues from long ago scientific papers, super old scientific papers, and genomics, because there's lots of scientists over the years that have had these crazy theories, and then they have no way to prove it. So then it just sits there. They get laughed out of the lecture hall, whatever it is. And then, decades later, we do some genomic research and we find out they were right all along. Tale as old as time in science. So the new theory here, or the old theory that has come to light, is that these insect wings actually evolved from an outgrowth or a lobe on the legs of crustaceans. Yes, so this is about 300 million years ago.
Crusty legs turned into wings.
Yes, exactly. Marine crustaceans transitioned to being land dwellers around 300 million years ago. The leg segments closest to their body became incorporated into their body wall, so part of their exoskeleton, during embryonic development. This might have been to support its weight on land. Not sure why. But then the leg lobes moved up towards the insect's back and later formed the wings. They're legs. They're crab legs. So this, yes. So prior until 2010, they were able to look at the genetics of insects and crustaceans, and they figured out that they're more closely related to crustaceans. Oh, geez, dog fell off a thing. Never mind. More closely related to crustaceans than to millipedes and centipedes, which is what the conventional wisdom was. It was just based on the way they looked. They were like, they look more like millipedes than crabs. We'll say that insects are related to millipedes. But no, we have since found out they are related more closely to crabs. She's fine if you're listening or watching. So anyway, this is how before they were thought to be these novel structures, the wings. But when they were looking at old studies, there was a paper in 1893 that said that insects had incorporated their proximal, which means close to the body, leg region into their body wall. So this theory existed from 1893. Then in the 1980s, there was a theory that the proximal leg region in the body wall was incorporated, but the lobes on the leg later moved to the back and formed wings. So reading both of those things, then comparing genetic instructions from the segmented legs of a crustacean. The crustacean they were looking at was the tiny beach hopper. And then looking at the segmented legs of insects, like the fruit fly, Drosophila. They actually they used CRISPR-Cas9 to edit their genome. They were able to disable the shared leg patterning genes between these two and found that the genes corresponded to the leg segments farthest from the body wall. And there was a seventh leg segment in the crustacean that they were able to track to the wings. So this was two historical theories that everyone kind of thought was bunk, that later the genetic data and embryonic data, they looked at embryonic development, of course, proved those theories.
The genome is so forensic.
Yes.
In its ability to uncover things that happened long ago. Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the scientists that worked on this said, one of the theories that is emerging from genomic comparisons is that nothing is brand new. Everything came from somewhere, and you can, in fact, figure out from where.
It started somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, it's the phylogeny, right? There's that biological saying, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which is to say that the development of an organism, it replays the evolution or the evolutionary path that organism took. So, for instance, the fact that humans, we have gills in the womb, we have webbed feet and toes, and then you end up being human without gills and without webbing between your toes. And
unfortunately for those living in Jamaica, New York. And other coastal.
Yeah, but it's in there. The instructions for gills, and this is chickens with the potential to have teeth, and these instructions they're in there somewhere. And at some point there is a novel mutation at some point in the phylogeny that leads to a branch, that leads to a new trait, that leads to something different, but it did start somewhere, and you can track it back. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah. So there you go. Insect wings. That's where they came from. Crab legs.
That's a huge story. Yeah.
Insect
wings, they came from crabs.
They sure did. So next, I'm going to move from crab wings to guinea fowl democracy. So
Moving on up.
yeah, this is a study from Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior and the Cluster of Excellence Center from the Advanced Study of Collective Behavior at the University of Konstanz. So a mouthful. They studied the links between dominance and group decision-making in wild vulturine guinea fowl. So a guinea fowl basically looks like an African chicken. They're native to the savannas of East Africa. The vulturine guinea fowl, as you might imagine, have a big bald head, and they eat carrion. So they look like vultures with dark-colored chicken bodies. You're welcome. Go Google it if you really want to know. They're pretty neat
They're
looking.
cute. I think
Yeah.
they're cute.
So, anywho, they wanted to study these guys because they are, here we go, the first bird species. So I'm sure there's others like this, but they're the first bird species to have been reported to live in a multi-level society where social groups have preferential interaction with other social groups. They can be in groups of 15 to 60 individuals, and within these large groups, there is a clear dominance. So not only is there a social hierarchy, the way social groups interact within this group, but on top of that, there is a dominance. So like wolves and primates, there is an alpha or a group of alphas. There's a group of dominant members that can outcompete other group members and exclude them from food. So they get preferential treatment, basically, because they're bullies, essentially.
It's mine. Yeah.
So the question is, how does this work with the fact that you also see them doing things that equates to what you might call voting? Now, bear with me. There are groups of animals that have equal say in certain things, and they quote unquote vote with their feet. So basically, whoever moves, whichever direction the most of them move in, that's the way the rest of the group has to follow. It reminds me of kind of schooling fish, right? But that's because, for example, these birds have bright plumage. They stick out. And so if they're by themselves, they're going to be eaten. But if they're in a big group, they're probably going to be left alone. Vulturine animals have like very nasty beaks. So they're not to be trifled with if they're in larger groups. So if the majority of the group is moving one way, it behooves the rest of the group to follow.
To do it, yeah.
Right. So this is part of this kind of voting element. So the weird thing is these vulturine guinea fowls do both. They have dominant individuals, and they also have been shown to vote with their feet. So how do these two blend is really what this is about. And in this study, they were able to observe them on foot, do video tracking, do high-resolution GPS. They looked across multiple groups of these guys spanning several years. And they were able to record disputes between individuals and then assign rank based on who won. Then they used an evaluation procedure just like you would do for chess, football, table tennis, any sort of playoff scenario where you can do comparative rankings. So you can figure out based on who won and lost to whom, who's ranked highest, who's ranked lowest, and everything in between. So they also then monitored which bird initiated departures from and to new feeding sites. So who started the movement away from a space or towards a space, and the order of individuals following them from first to last. This is a lot of data. But what they found was that who initiated and often therefore decided where the group moved to next was dependent on actions of the dominant group members. But that doesn't mean it was the dominant group members who made those decisions. It means that was influenced by the actions of the dominant group members before that. So when groups are feeding in large areas and food was distributed accessibly to everyone, then all of the group members contribute equally to where they were going next. But when dominant individuals basically were jerks and monopolized a particularly rich food patch, didn't let other people eat it, chasing other groups out, guinea fowl. Then the excluded subordinates combined their votes to move the group away from the patch. So basically like, oh, you're going to be a jerk about this food? Okay, great. We're all going to leave then, and you can't eat at all. So they ended up having to abandon the rich resources that they were able to kind of hoard in that previous interaction. So this suggests that democratic decision-making, as opposed to despotic leadership, evolved so that group members could obtain resources that they needed to survive despite their ranking.
So this is the story of
Everyone
America.
has a voice.
This is the story of America. This is how America got its start. There were resource hoarders back in England.
Yeah.
And America was like, people who became Americans, and you were like, you know what? Let's just leave. Let's just leave them.
We need to find a different food patch.
Yeah, and go to a place where we can.
If this was like that, then the king would have followed. That's what the difference is.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
by the way, he tried. He did try. He did try.
Yeah. So I think that's the difference here. But also, I would say if you want to draw a human comparison, this is an important thing for us to remember now. Because we find ourselves now, once again, with a very small number of people with a lot of resources.
Right.
And there is an understanding that, well, what are you going to do? They have the resources. But here is proof right here that the people who have less resources actually have a lot of power. Because if you take the group away from that individual with all the resources, they're not as well off. So that's kind of my moral out of this, if you want to turn it into an Aesop fable. Like the last story was kind of like an Aesop fable. Now it's like the vulturine guinea fowl and the power of democracy. Is this Aesop fable?
Or even into capitalism. So, for instance, people who are asking others not to shop with Amazon, if eventually they get enough people to go along with it, then Amazon will maybe change some of its employment and climate change practices.
Yeah. So
Right?
the thing I was thinking
it's
is
just, it's like, how does it kind of works that way. So
you have to be reminded that you
swell.
have the power, I think, is what's really important here. So
Yes.
the last couple of quotes I'll leave you with from this story says, by being able to initiate and make the group move away from monopolized resources, democratic decision-making allows subordinates to take back control when too much power is lost to dominance. So one of the lead researchers, Danai Papageorgiou, which is a doctor researcher at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior and the leading researcher of this study, says, quote, "Our findings highlight how collectives can react to rising social inequity. Democratic decision-making is critical for maintaining a balance of power in societies where functioning as a group is critical to survival."
Right. And so to have that, you need first a democracy. And then the migration can be to policies that favor the group over the select few individuals. You can politically migrate to do that. You don't have to go to the moon or find a new patch of of dirt.
And I believe there are some pretty good lines out of Monty Python's Holy Grail that have relation to this as well.
Help! I'm being oppressed.
Yeah, you know which scene I'm talking about.
Yes, I sure do.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's fun. Democratic birds. They can teach us so much about ourselves. These birds, these animals. Really, it's all connected, isn't it? It is. Thank you for listening to TWIS. If you are watching right now, thank you so much for being here. If you're listening right now, thank you for putting us into your ears. We love getting into your brains and worming our ways in with information to be able to build your curiosity and hopefully get you to ask questions and learn more about the world that we share together. If you like listening to or watching TWIS, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You can head to twis.org, click on the Patreon link, and select the level of your support. $10 and more per month will get you thanked by name at the end of the show, and a lot of the levels have neat goodies, many of which will be sent out very soon. Another way that you can support us right now is purchasing one of the 2021 Blair's Animal Corner calendars with the Hypno Frog on the cover. Head to twis.org, click on the Hypno Frog, and purchase your calendar today. I'll be mailing those out very soon as well. We really can't do any of this without you. And if you feel like the buying things and supporting in the financial way is something that is out of your ability at this point in time, please know that if you share us with other people, that is an amazing way that you can help us. Tell other people about TWIS, help us grow our audience, help us grow our family of people who enjoy science together and love curiosity. That is a huge way to help as well. Thank you for your support. Can't do it without you. All right, Justin, do you have a story? You got something to talk about?
This is Lancaster University researchers studying crystalline materials have discovered it has properties that allow it to capture energy from the sun.
What?
That can then be stored at room temperature for several months, then be released on demand in the form of heat.
Wait. So it's like a sponge for sun.
Exactly.
But
It
you
is
fill
very
it
much
up.
a sponge.
But then you fill it up and it holds the sunlight / the water analogy. It just holds on to it until you need it. What? At room temperature? What is this crazy material?
Many months. And they're saying this could be used, you could capture sunlight energy in the summer months and then release it to create some warmth or heat. It's, in the winter or something like this. You could ingrain it into windshields of cars, collect sun, and then you have that icy morning, and you could release that heat, and it could melt off the frost or all sorts of possibilities. Maybe even for energy, maybe for drug delivery, maybe for all sorts of things. So it's a really interesting, this is a material that's based on a metal organic framework, or MOF, M-O-F. This is a network of metal ions linked by carbon-based molecules. They form this sort of 3D structure. Key property of them is that they are porous, like a sponge, meaning they can form composite materials that host other smaller molecules within their structures. What's also interesting about these things is that they, with a chemical reactant, the way that they're designed, like Lego pieces that can only go together one way, you kind of take all of the components, you put it in there, you have a reaction, chemical reaction initiation that takes place, and everything assembles on a nano scale exactly as it's intended to. Like near 100% perfection, they assemble themselves, because there's really, by design, only one way that they're able to attract and connect and stay linked together. So from a manufacturing process, it's really low effort. It's to get them to create these structures.
Yeah.
So the Lancaster team, though, they set out to look at this composite that was previously prepared by a separate research team in Kyoto University in Japan, DMOF1, could be used to store energy, something that it had not been tested for. So they took the MOF pores, this sponge, and they loaded it with molecules of azobenzene, which by itself is an incredible molecule. It's a crystalline molecule that is photoreactive. So if you change the polarity of light, it can act like a switch. It can gather up and then be triggered to release its energy. It absorbs light amazingly well. It's considered a molecular machine, just in the way, and it works in UV light in this experiment here. So in the test, researchers exposed the material to UV light, which causes the azobenzene molecules to change shape to a strained configuration inside of this moth, inside of this sponge. So it stores energy that stored energy is like potential energy, which is sort of like if you bend a spring, and then there's that energy built up in that spring that's just waiting for you to release it so it can spring back. And then that energy is released. So these narrow pores of the moth sponge trap the azobenzene molecules in their strained position. And in the research, it was at least 4 months. I guess that's probably how long they ran it for. It was at least 4 months. They held the energy and then could be triggered to switch states and release that energy as heat. So this is a really interesting effect that they found. Apparently, the overall energy ability to hold and release this was pretty modest, but this is also the first one that they've done this to. So there may be other photoreactives that have a greater potential to hold larger amounts of energy. And this is the quote from Dr. John Griffin, who's the senior lecturer in materials chemistry at Lancaster University and one of the investigators in the study, quoting, "The material functions a bit like phase change materials, which are used to supply heat in hand warmers. However, while hand warmers need to be heated in order to recharge them, the nice thing about this material is it captures free energy directly from the sun. It has no moving or electronic parts, and so there are no losses involved in the storage and release of the solar energy. Hope that with further development, we will be able to make other materials which store even more energy."
That's so cool. I'm so key questions for how useful this will be. I mean, this is mind blowing and mind boggling at the potential. Is how much material can hold how much energy can be released? Is it all the energy? How much energy is lost over time? How much does this material cost? Yeah, but how much does this material cost? How expensive will it be to produce? Is it something that they expect to make more efficient over time and to bring costs down? Is there any way? Is this something that will be broadly applicable at some point in time? That's really the question.
Perhaps not the specific material, but other applications for crystalline materials that do this photo switching, which may even be this material at some point, but wasn't looked at.
Cool.
So you have a set defined arrangement of basically photoelectric switches within a crystalline structure at a nano level. They can then be triggered or switched with a light source. So now we're talking data storage, which we always end up in. Like, no matter what it is, it's like, oh, that could be used for data storage.
Interesting.
It also has the ability then to be implicated in drug delivery. So
because of the photo switch involved, right?
Exactly.
It could be locked up and then released based on light exposure.
A lot of people made fun of Trump talking about if we put light inside of people, because he's an idiot. But in this case, that you could deliver a drug that's being held in the sponge anywhere in the body. Once it's accumulated, you could flash a flashlight on it or of some sort and trigger it to do a release right at the area in which it was targeted, or only in the area in which it was targeted. So these moths, this is like
super exciting.
This is the sort
next level.
This is the it's not quite the nanotechnology that we were imagining a decade ago, where these tiny robots were going to build and self-assemble and do stuff for us, but it's the actual one that's come out of this so far, basically, where you have self-assembly by the pure fact that there's only one way to assemble, and you smush it all together, and so it assembles this thing perfectly, because you've engineered it to assemble perfectly, like these little Lego blocks that can only fit in one way. And the applications are almost are right now outpacing. The potential applications are outpacing the technology's ability. And whenever you see that, then you see investment, and then you see pursuing multiple directions of refinement of this technology so that you may get the drug delivery, the solar batteries, the self-defrosting windshields, the new tinier computers or same-size computers with much greater capacity that may actually be more reliable. All of these things come from breakthroughs in materials and application technology that this MOF or metal organic frameworks seems to be leading us towards. So every time you think you're at the future, and
there's another step.
There's
more.
another future that comes right in behind it and says, "Oh no, that was the future. I can see a new one on the horizon."
Yeah. I with these metal organic frameworks, I just love the chemistry concept of using the empty space in molecules.
Yeah.
It's using the tension between the atoms in the molecule, as you're talking about, but it's also taking advantage of the empty space that is inside of the molecule, putting other stuff in it. Like it's just that concept itself is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, and if you go look up azobenzene, AZOBENZENE, there's some fun videos online of crystals that are just getting different polarities of light, and the crystal is adjusting itself to the polarity of the light that is going through it.
Amazing.
I mean, when you talk photoreactive, it is a non-living thing, absolutely reacting in predictable ways. That's the important part. Reacting in a predictable way, alignment-wise.
Not like people.
Well,
it's predictable.
Yeah, we're a little bit on that side too. Oh, and then to end the stories, I almost found a different story. I kept trying to replace this story, and it kept being with stories that you'd already found, Kiki.
Oh,
I think the ones that are coming up. I kept wanting to do
Great.
those ones because I didn't want to do this story, but okay. So this is out of UC Davis Veterinary School and other places.
you don't have to do this story if you don't want to.
I don't like it, but they did pathology reports on 50 killer whales, a little bit more than 50 killer whales over a decade. So it's a small sample size and a really long time, but we don't often get a lot of deceased killer whales that we can actually study. These are ones that have to get beached. We have to get there in time. We have to be able to diagnose how they even died. And what the study was looking at is it's in the journal PLOS One published yesterday. I want to know what's killing killer whales. How do they die? What's happened here? And in pretty much most of the cases that they could define, it was humans.
Ugh. How?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
So we often think that we are affecting wildlife through noise pollution or pollution toxins in the water, this sort of thing. It was everything from getting gouged by a hook for some other fishing purpose to getting strikes by large seagoing vessels. So there was actual direct killing, not just the sort of indirect stuff that was going on. That was the one cause that seemed to go across age and health of individuals. There were some of the individuals that died because they were in poor health. Some that were just, old and had accumulated a lot of health issues. But the one thing that crossed through all age and health barriers, it was humans. And so these are largely populations that we're attempting to preserve because we've also been attacking their food sources and the rest of it. But yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say is a lot of these interactions are probably related to that they're ending up in the same place as vessels that are trying to collect fish. So that creates conflict because either they're going to try to get that whale out of the way so that they don't lose any of their take, which is probably how a lot of those spears happen. Or they get hit by the boat because they're both following the same school of fish.
Yeah, although I think these might be... the impression I got that though was that, and it actually didn't specify, so I assumed it and you assumed it. My assumption that was that these were somehow shipping vessels. Because I'm trying to picture a smaller vessel being able to take out an orca, and I can't.
So I mean, they're big. Whales are big, right?
Yeah.
But I think that also there's fishing vessels that are really heavy and really kind of
Big.
dense, and hardy, and I don't think it's necessarily shipping vessels always.
No, I think you're right. That was an assumption I made when I first read it. And one of the things actually that when we were talking about a while ago with that rogue orca pod that was attacking boats, turning them around and telling them to go home earlier this year, was that some of the fishermen actually, if they see orca, will pursue them to find tuna or other healthy, good fishing grounds.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem is a lot of marine animals that we end up kind of infringing upon. It's because we're after the same resources.
Yeah. I'm looking through pictures that I'm not going to share because it's just too sad of a lot of emaciated orcas that they found that were part of their survey for this study.
And it's being asked in the chat room, but so these weren't ones that were killed or sunk, which is why it's such a small sample size over this time. These are ones that they found beached. Yeah. So they had to. I mean, they
found them dead.
It's not a great sample size for any form of a study. It's like, let's just study the things that happen to show up on our front porch.
Well, it's doing a roadkill study, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a really good way to figure out why animals die on the road, not just why animals die in general. Which is why this is like, exactly. This is why killer whales die and then get beached. Yes. It's not why killer whales die overall.
Which was why I kept trying to replace it with the stories that Kiki has coming up, because those were really good stories.
They are. This is a good story. It's a sad story. There's a lot that we can do to influence our interaction with the other animals on this planet, right? More positively. We got to share a little bit. Humans. But yes, I do have 3 stories that I want to talk about before the end of the show. And Blair, the first one has to do with telomeres.
Yes, give me those telomeres.
Are you sure?
Give me so many aglets. I just want all of the aglets all over.
Are you sure? Are you sure? Careful what you ask for.
Right, you think you want those little shoelace ends. You think you want those telomeres at capping the ends of your chromosomes. Well, according to this new study out of Rockefeller University, telomerase and telomeres are very likely involved in your likelihood of getting cancer. This study...
No.
Yes. It involved with the researchers in Radboud University Medical Center in Holland, where they have identified Dutch families that are severely cancer prone. And these families have mutations in a gene called TNF2. And this gene encodes the TIN2 protein that is part of controlling telomere length. And so they pulled a researcher from Rockefeller into this study to look into what was going on with TIN2 and telomeres. A postdoctoral fellow, Isabel Schmutz, used CRISPR as a tool to engineer cells so that they have the exact same mutations as the cells that are seen in the Dutch families, and then looked at these mutants, and they had so they had these mutated tin2 proteins. Their telomeres were doing great, super functional, no genomic instability, but the telomeres got too long, which is part of what was going on in these Dutch families.
Blair's looking at you right now like, can a telomere be too long? I didn't think that was possible.
Think that it could be.
And indeed, that is what this study says. Long telomeres. The longer your telomeres are, the higher your chances of getting cancer. And the reason for this is that the telomeres limit the number of times that your cells divide. Every time your cells divide, the telomeres shorten. And if your telomeres are long, that allows for potentially more divisions and more time for mutations to occur. And if mutations occur in cancer-promoting regions, then you're more likely to get cancer. So there's a balancing point between maintaining our telomeres.
Yes. So maintain, don't lengthen.
Don't lengthen, but we want to really be careful about. So what this gets down to at the real basic level is that our stem cells have the telomerase that allows the refreshing of the telomeres. It keeps adding to the length of the telomeres so that the stem cells can divide pretty much indefinitely, and they can divide into different cell types. And they're like, oh, I'm going to be anything. And our adult cells, the cells that have differentiated, don't have this. They don't have that ability. They have a very limited division potential. And so how do we get the cells to stay healthier longer and not necessarily divide too early so that you end up, you don't want to end up being 70 years old, but you're going to live to 150, 200 years old, but you're on your last cells. They can't divide anymore because they're out of telomerase. But if you were lengthening it, then you might get more cancer. So, I mean, there's this balance that needs to be struck somewhere.
Yeah, it seems maintenance, not augmentation, right? Yeah. That's what you need, is you need to make sure that your telomeres don't get shorter. Longer is not the answer. Just keep them.
And what did we learn about telomeres in space?
They get longer in space, and then they get shorter when you come back to Earth. So again, weird things.
What's that?
Oh boy!
We've got a secret mission into the neutral zone. Okay, warp 8. What's that? Oh, I gotta get another colonoscopy. All right, I'll be right back. Like space, you're gonna have to be totally vigilant in treating cancer all the time because you're gonna have longer telomeres.
Longer telomeres. Moving away from telomeres and refreshing the telomeres, let's talk about refreshing our biology. Like just refreshing the cells, refreshing our eyes.
Oh, that would be good.
Starting over, you're getting glaucoma, pressure increases in your eyes, you're starting to get glaucoma. Oh my gosh, can we just go back to a younger eye state?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes, please. Well, researchers publishing today in Nature suggest that it's possible. And what they are doing is research based on previous research out of La Jolla, California, the Salk Institute, done by Juan Carlos Ispizua Belmonte, who has been looking into the epigenome and changing the epigenome. As I mentioned earlier with the talking about that plant memory study about wiping the epigenetic markers from the genome, as you age, your epigenome changes. You start out with your basic epigenome, your DNA is wrapped up in a certain way based on the histones and the methylation. And that's just the way it is when you're younger, but then based on experiences during your life, stress, environment, all sorts of things, the epigenome changes and there are more twists and turns and it kind of gets mucked up. And they think that part of this building and adding of epigenetic markers leads to some parts of aging and our cells getting older and things just not working quite as well. And so this question is, can you reset the epigenome? 2016, Belmonte showed that there were 4 genes in mice that could revert skin cells back to a stem cell-like state. They could do that. But there was a problem with the potential of using these genes for too long. They had to be used for just the right amount of time, or they would cause cancer. And you don't want to cause cancer. It's like go be stem cell-like, or go be young again, but don't be too young. Don't start dividing all over the place and give me a tumor. And so the researchers now that are publishing,
for every time I heard that growing up. Don't be a tumor.
Don't be a tumor. Don't do that. These researchers publishing in Nature today, they looked at the eye's retinal nerves, and they tested the approach using 3 of those 4 genes that were used by Espizua Belmonte. And in this study, the one they got rid of was one of the ones that triggers cancer more often. So that was probably a good call on that front. These genes are just, they're SOX genes, HOX and SOX, and they're a little cocktail of genes that are involved in developmental aspects of cell metabolism and functioning. And they pretty much showed in this study that they were able to take from mice old retinal cells and regenerate them. They improved visual acuity in mice with age-related vision loss. They also reset epigenetic patterns to a more youthful state in mice, and also in human cells in the laboratory. But so far, really what we're looking at is in mice. They're resetting mice. So we are doing such a good job at making mice younger.
Curing everything that has ever befallen mice.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting to note, though, 6 out of 5 ophthalmologists are against this drug.
I wonder why that would be. No, you're making that up, but still, it's gonna put some jobs on the line. And right in line with this study, these 2 studies were like right next to each other, and I can't believe that all this aging research is coming out all at once. So we've got this team, the Salk team, and this team publishing in Nature. They're publishing on their epigenome efforts to reverse aging. And now also a UC San Francisco team looking at stress response in cells is also trying to reverse aging. And they're using a drug called ISRIB. And this ISRIB, it stands for Integrated Stress Response Inhibitor. The integrated stress response is a response that was discovered by the Walter Lab at UCSF. The integrated stress response is in the cells. Stress happens and your cells respond to it, and the response is not usually great. And over time, the effects of stress build up in our cells and lead to gene mutations, all sorts of problems. Protein synthesis slows down. Things don't work as well. Cells start behaving poorly, and suddenly you have issues like dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So they have been using this drug, ISRIB, the inhibitor to the stress response. And in this study, they showed in mice that they were able to inject the ISR inhibitor and reset the mental functioning of mice to an earlier state.
Do you think
sign
this
me
takes
up
away
for the test, human test?
Yeah.
No, I'm ready. I'm ready now.
Right? Yeah.
Do you think this takes away the sensation of stress? Or do you think it only takes away
No, the effects of stress.
The effects of stress. So
yes,
that's
it's cellular. Yeah.
Right. So this is definitely also sign me up. But I just kind of wanted to clarify that, because I do think that, you know, there's a feedback loop. I will also admit, though, that there's a physiological response to stress that can trigger more stress. So
Right.
I do also think that there would be potential benefits on feeling stress emotionally.
Oh, of course. This doesn't
Based
stop.
on this. Yeah.
No, yeah, this is not the emotional stress response. This has nothing to do with that. This is
Right.
internal cell cascade in a physiological metabolic stress in that the cells are experiencing. It would be, you know, something like oxidation stress, or even, you know, oxygen, a lack of oxygen, or, you know, a change in pH, or little factors that could be considered as stress to a cell. But yeah, I mean, I get that would build up to organismal level stress as well. But what this is suggesting is that over time, the functioning of this system, while it is great in the moment for helping cells survive stress, over time it leads to the buildup of side effects that are detrimental, and that are detrimental if you're considering in the brain, detrimental to cognitive functioning. And so they did small doses of this drug in older mice, tested them on cognitive tasks against youthful mice, and they found that the older mice performed as well as the younger mice once they had been given this drug. And it's not a drug that has to be given continually over time. It appears from the study to have, from a short period of application of the drug, that the effects are long lasting. So it resets to an earlier state, so the stress response can build up again.
So combine that with the blood transfusion,
right?
Evidence of the past.
Reset my epigenome. I want the young people blood. I want the ISRIB.
Young microbiome too.
Yes, young microbiome transplant. There we go.
I don't know about the age-defined definitions of the microbiome. I don't know that. I feel like my microbiome is stronger now, or as strong.
Well, I mean, we've definitely reported on studies where they did a microbiome transplant from young mice to old mice. So
that was a blood study. That was a blood transfusion. What
I think
they've done microbiome.
Microbiome.
Yes, but that was from obese to skinny mice, and they reversed.
They did one with young to old mice also.
I don't recall
microbiome.
That.
Yeah.
I'll have to go and look that one up
In fact, I was hearing Brian's professor talk about it this morning in his microbiology class. So
okay.
Blair knows. It's true. I remember. Yes. But so far, all of these studies, while sounding so exciting and promising, are on mice. The exciting aspect of this is that both of the studies that I just talked about, the epigenetic reset and the stress response reset, both of them do already have companies that are translating this basic research out of the research labs and into potential therapeutics. So both of these are already on their way into human application. It's going to be a long road, clinical studies, all that. I know. I will too. I was looking online, and ISI, I'm not going to say anything. You can look these things up online. You can Google them. It's just amazing. A single treatment with a small molecule erased these stress response. This is the kind of they're looking at ISRIB to help with traumatic brain injury. It has they say, the researchers say, it didn't just make up for some of the cognitive deficits in mice with traumatic brain injury, it erased them. They've never seen anything like this before. They saw issues related to these injuries disappear overnight. So they're thinking that repetitive mild brain injury, like concussion accidents, that ISRIB could help with that. Additionally, it could help for treat Alzheimer's and dementia. It could, there's a whole bunch of application for a drug like this in the market, and especially in an aging population, and in a population that enjoys its contact sports.
Yeah.
It's both of it. It's very exciting.
Although I think it'd be really dangerous if I reduced my stress response.
Like I said, it's not going to reduce your stress response. It's a short-term application. So far, I mean, this is just in mice. It hasn't been in people, but this drug, it has a very broad, general-sounding name, but it's not going to reduce your stress response. It resets it. So it's not an old cell's stress response anymore. It is a young cell's stress response.
Oh, okay, so I might be more stressed.
It's taken back the clock. Yes, no, and it's not going to affect your stress levels. You're going to be, no, it's not going to do that. This is at the cellular level. Stop. Just because I say stress, it doesn't mean that you're like in ball of anxiety.
You said stress. That freaked me out when you said that. Okay.
Sorry. All right, those are my stories. We have one question to end the show. This week in Science Questions, we have a question today. Hi, Twisters. I have a few related questions about human immune systems. With so much attention on the COVID-19 vaccine race, I was wondering if we know how many viruses humans collectively are immune to globally, and two, if there is theorized to be a limit in order of magnitude of the number of viruses the immune system can protect us from, or does it appear limitless? We have access to many vaccines and an annual flu vaccine, so we can gain immunity to each new strain as influenza virus mutates. 3, is there a theory as why the immune system may retain a long-term memory for some viruses but not others? Thanks, Emma Moulton.
Can I try real quick?
You can try real quick. I've got some answers, but
no, and yes.
All right, I like your answers. Okay, that's good. Very, very simple answers. I like it. Straightforward. Cut to the chase. All right, so I did a little digging and found that according to a 2012 paper, there are 200, or at least in 2012, probably more now, but in 2012, there were 219 known virus species that infect humans. Only 212 known. But other estimates, it does sound low, right? But when you're talking about what we know, that means what we can isolate, what we can identify, what we can, really track down to being a virus. That in itself is challenging. And so has the work been done to do that? Other estimates suggest that there are as many that there are many magnitudes more from 320,000 viruses. This is based on looking at mammal studies, to more than 3 million viruses that affect mammals generally. And then if you go out broadly to vertebrates and other organisms, there's so many viruses. So the good news is it's also estimated that the human body can produce 10 billion antibodies. So if we're only going against that 219 known viruses, we're doing great.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
we can do a great job of producing antibodies.
Yeah, but isn't that
should
also
protect us,
its own numbers game? Like, we've produced antibodies, but not enough of them. Or
not
we
right.
produced antibodies and we beat this one, and now they're all being used because we can't fight this other thing.
Or
like, it is a little.
Or we have 10 billion, but they're just still not the right antibody
right.
and that doesn't match, right? For instance, SARS-CoV-2, if you haven't been infected by a coronavirus before, if you, this is a novel virus. The spike protein is something that's fairly new to human immune systems. And so some people may have better immunity because for whatever reason, they already have an antibody that matches up to that really well. But a lot of us don't. Most of us don't. But the great thing is that we can gain immunity, and the adaptive immune system is amazing for that. And so we just need a little experience with a virus to be able to become immune to them, usually. Hopefully we can gain that immunity without dying in the process.
That's a really clever thing about our immune system is that it's not preloaded, pre-programmed like virus software might be to look for, right? Think of it as I didn't mean it to be virus to virus, but for a software virus screener or whatever, it's looking for specific viruses only. If a new novel one comes along, it will never fix it. It will miss it completely and entirely because it's not programmed to look at that.
Yeah.
The human immune system actually is looking to learn from the next invader and then create a response to it so that it kind of almost doesn't matter what it is. It should be able to have at least a very good fighting chance to defeat it, no matter if there's 219 or 320 million or whatever the upper number was of this potentiality of viruses to encounter. And then, what you were saying is like if you have one that was, maybe it is a completely novel virus that has entered the system, but if it has the same spike protein as 300 others that have come and gone, you should be able to beat it even though it's otherwise different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's a probability game.
The other thing that's kind of cool about it is that viruses need us to be able to reproduce, right? This makes them a virus. And so, I think about viruses the way I think about parasites. A good parasite doesn't kill its host. Yeah. So viruses, in order to be good at what they do, shouldn't kill you quickly. And that gives your body time to develop
slowly
antibodies. Exactly. It gives you time.
Well, it shouldn't kill you at all.
Exactly.
Which is why this
making a bad joke.
Which is why this virus probably does not harm bats at all.
Right.
Or with the origin mutation, at least, if this isn't the same, doesn't harm bats in any way. They're symbiotic. It may even have some weird, unbeknownst beneficial niche within bat society that we could find out at some point. We don't know about. Yeah. But the problem is we're not the right host. We're the current vector that we're concerned about because we're us and that's all we care about. But we're not the intended host. So then you go into a system where you're not. What's the pain relief? Okay, this is too much of a tangent. But there's a pain relief that they used to say this is the one you would take if you have the PMS cramps. Is it Motrin? Is that right?
Midol.
Sure.
Midol, Motrin, whatever it was. If a guy takes it, it's running around in there with this map, and it can't find where it's supposed to go. It's the same sort of a thing. Like,
I don't think that's
a bad
right,
example.
sure.
That's a terrible example. I said it ahead of time, but yeah. So it's what we have isn't an intended effect of this virus to destroy the host, because that is, like you say, completely an antithesis of what it wants to do. However, we are doing an exceptional job of one of the stages, which is the replication and spreading of it. So that aspect, its reproductive cycle is doing phenomenally well, even if it eventually runs out of us through killing us or through resistance.
And then that comes down to the last question, which is,
terrible example.
to do with long-term memory. So it seems like we need to get booster shots for our vaccines. We need to, our immune system seems to get tired of remembering things over time. And why is that? Well, I mean, everything.
On to the next one.
Yeah. So, I mean, that comes down to a couple of different things that work together to affect immunity over time. And we have viral mutation. So the viruses can mutate slightly. And so you might need a slightly different vaccine. That booster may have a slightly different antigen makeup than a previous shot. And your immune system gets older. And as your immune system gets older, the old stuff that's gone unused for a really long time does sometimes go out with the trash. Sometimes, those B cells that are the memory B cells, T cells that are in there and supposed to be holding on to these antibody memories for us. I mean, if you haven't come across something for a very, 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 very long time, your body's going to think that it doesn't need it anymore. And in biology, it is definitely a mantra: use it or lose it. Mm-hmm. So having over time, your immune system just gets older, and older immune systems don't create as much antibody. They're not creating large healthy cells. They're creating little weaker cells that can't do as much. So you have mutations, you have time. Lots of things go into that, but yeah. Over time, the body does kind of go, I don't need that anymore. Maybe. I don't think there is a single vaccine that we have that is supposed to last for life.
Right. Like, well, the reason that, for example, we don't need polio vaccines anymore is because people got them for long enough that it went extinct, essentially. So it's not that the vaccine worked forever. It's that it worked for long enough that it couldn't find a host.
No more hosts.
And so it died.
Yeah. Yeah. And so nobody has to get polio vaccines anymore, which is great.
Yeah. And so that's, I think, that's the thing about the vaccination and all these kinds of things is eventually you want to just not need the antibodies anymore because it doesn't exist anymore.
And wouldn't that be great?
Yeah,
it would. Great. It would. Thank you so much for your question, Emma. It's so great to hear from you. If anyone else wants to ask a question, send them my way. Send me an email, Kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, or you can leave a note over on Facebook. Leave a message over there on our This Week in Science page. All right. I think we've done it. I think we have come to the end of the show. Have we done it? We've done it.
We've done it.
We've done it. Yeah, we've done it. We've done it. Yes, we have. Thank you all for joining us for another episode. Thank you so much. I want to give the shout outs. Thank you to Fada for your help with social media and show notes. Gord, thank you for manning the chat room. And Identity4, thank you for recording the show. I'd also like to thank our Patreon sponsors and the Burroughs Welcome Fund for their generous support. Thank you to Woody MS, Andre Basset, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vegard Shefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Scioli, Guillaume, John Lee, Gaurav Sharma, Shubru, Sarah Forfar, Darwin Handon, Donald Mundus, Stephen Albaran, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Bentley, the Translator, Big Nell, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Joshua Fury, Sean and Nina Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflode, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard Brendan Minish Melizond, Johnny Gridley, Kevin Railsback, Flying Out, Richard Porter, Christopher Dreyer, Mark Mazzaros, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Conrad Michaels is a Russian super spy, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Matt Sutter, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Mountain Sloth, Jim Drapeau, Sarah Chavez, Alex Wilson, John Ratnaswamy, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, and Eric Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Stanton, Paul Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, Ben Rotheg, Gary S., Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, Brian Condren, Jason Roberts, and Dave Friedel. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. If you would like to support us on Patreon, head to twis.org and click on the Patreon link. On next week's show,
All right. Where I gotta talk stuff. We will be back Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels and from twis.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast?
Sure.
You might want to hear the more
Okay.
polished version of the show. I think it's fun to hear the other stuff. But anyway, if you do want to listen to us as a podcast, you can search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, you can also get your friends to subscribe as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, because we love your friends, even though we've not met them yet. For more information on anything you've heard here today, there will be show notes, links to the stories themselves. So if you're like, I really want to read more about that, you can. Just go to our website, www.twis.org. You can also sign up for a newsletter that will give you information in your email hole.
And you can contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered all the way into a super chilled portable freezer next to vaccine doses.
Yes. Nice. Awesome. That's actually a good place to put a spam email. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science with one S in the middle, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes due tonight, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say, and if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science.
This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in 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 science.
And that's the end. I turned it off. Chunk. Ta-da! We finished a show. It was probably 45 hours long. It was 2 hours, 34 minutes, 12 seconds. A whole half hour of nothing at the beginning. And now it's the end of the show. It's the after show. I've been showing comments.
I'm tired now.
Boop. I'm tired too. It's late. It's almost 11 here on the West Coast. All you East Coasters, thank you for staying up late with us, you nighttime people. Oh no, software crash. I will download. I have the backup. Download. Oh my gosh. With Thanksgiving, I will admit I did not get the podcast out for last Wednesday until yesterday. Go me. That took me a while.
Yeah, well.
I took a weekend. I took a long weekend, and it really felt good. And nice. I'm glad I did it. I was sad to get the podcast out later than normal, but sometimes I gotta do what I gotta do. What I think I need now is, because I'm spending a lot of time finding edits and listening to the show as I go and spending a lot more time editing the show. I've been thinking I need somebody who watches the show to write down time codes of possible edits.
That's very smart.
And then send them to me. So somebody who likes watching the show every week. I mean, maybe we should have a document. Maybe I'll do an Excel document. Start the timer at the beginning of the episode. I'll have an Excel document that people can just populate with things that they would like to see edited out for the podcast.
Get a chair.
Recommendations and suggestions.
This is the part of the show where I sit.
I would like to save all the whales. Artem, absolutely. Gaurav, did I see the news on Red Cross finding COVID antibodies and blood donated back in December 2019? I have seen headlines on it and like the summaries, but I haven't dug into it deeply. But I did see that news. Yeah. There was, from what I can tell, there was an NPR story on this. They found COVID antibodies back a ways, which means it's been around for a while. Virus in the U.S. from before China said that they had even had a case. Oh, thanks, Shubru. That'd be cool. Yeah, just for the show itself, it's good to. Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe I can do like a Google sheet or something that something that's every episode. Make it shared with everyone. You could just put time codes in and be like, maybe take this out.
Oh, jeez. That you need to be careful, Kiki, because that might get into a lot of cooks in the kitchen at once.
I know. It might be a fun experiment to see how it turns out, though.
I guess. So I think that this idea about antibodies in the blood back in December is a really important thing to discuss too, because like,
yeah, okay. Let's discuss.
I know. So first of all, I know we're pretty sure it came from the wet market. Sure. Fine. Whatever. Okay. Fine. But, there was this whole thing about, it was called the Wuhan flu for a while. And the whole idea was like, that's how it's been done for a long time. You name it after the place that it came from, like whatever, Spanish flu, blah, blah. But like, there's research now that indicates that the Spanish flu didn't come from Spain. So I think that's part of this too, is like, okay, it might have originated in the wet markets, but what actually created global spread? Was it Wuhan, or was it a pocket in America that we didn't even know about in December? Like, there's definitely, we don't know the full kind of forensics of where it came from, where it spread to before like February. So.
Yeah, we don't know any of that. And I think it's I think there's a lot forensically. We talk a lot about like going back in time and figure things out. There's a lot forensically that that we still need to figure out for sure. I think you've made some really good points here.
And I wanted to do this when Justin was here, but I'll do it now. So this was in June 2019. There was a study transplanting gut microbes from young to old mice, and it showed a reverse in immune system decline.
Oh, you found it.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure
Cool.
we reported on this on the show. And also
I probably reported on it and just totally forgot it.
Last month,
I think you did.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that you did. And last month, I don't think we did report on this one. I don't think. But they went the other way. They took fecal microbiota from aged mice and put them into young mice
and made
they
them
found
old.
that it affected their spatial learning and memory.
Wow. See, it all derives from the microbiota.
Yep.
It really
Mess
does.
with the gut
So they
brain
went both
axis.
ways, which I think is very cool.
So I've
good.
diagnosed the series of events that led to the technical destruction of my computer in the minutes before the show started tonight. It started with this microphone, which my children were playing with, and they kind of, I think, handled it a little rough. Somehow managed to tweak the inside so it's not stable anymore, which meant even though the cable was in there, let me see if I can even demonstrate. Even when the cable is locked into place, it has all of this play. Where's the camera? Has a tremendous amount of play that it's not supposed to have. Okay?
Yeah.
So I realized that was the issue, and then I was going to just plug the USB mic in. Where the computer is under this desk is this little triangle with slats on the bottom and a piece that's kind of stuck in the front of it. So I had to twist the computer ever so slightly to get access to the front USB cable plug-in, USB port. So I did that, and as soon as I did that, it tweaked the antenna for the Wi-Fi that's on the USB into the back of this computer, bent it and broke it, lost the internet. Realizing what had happened then, what I needed to do was unplug a bunch of stuff and plug it into this laptop. Not a really big deal. Should happen pretty quick. And I go to twist the computer the little bit further I need to get those cables out, and it won't move. And I'm in my head, it's the slats at the bottom. The feet are stuck in the slats. So I lift it and twist it, which then twisted the HDMI cable sideways, or not even sideways, just ever so slightly, enough to break the HDMI cable. So that the computer, which even offline, I had all my stories in a offline document that I could view here, but now I can't see them. And it all happened within a couple of minutes, right at the outset of the show. So, yeah, that was fun. And then
you looked so sad at the beginning of the show.
I was, because then I also realized that this Chromebook needs to get like purged and reset every time before doing the show because it slows down over time with use. Because
how do you purge your Chromebook? I'm very curious about that. What do you do?
Okay, so I go over to the three little vertical dots.
Repair. That's funny.
And I go down to more tools, and it says clear browsing data.
Oh, you clear that.
That's that's number one. You got to do that because there's very limited hard drive on these things. Even with the virtual hard drive, it fills it all up just with interneting around.
Right.
So you got to clear that, and then a reset after that usually makes it like a brand new machine almost. But
So
if you
say it
don't
again. So you clear the browser history and then what?
clear browsing data, which if I click on that, it's also it'll show it's not a lot at all. Let me see what it's probably not going to be. Yeah, it's like 180 megabytes or something. It's like tiny. Of cached files and such, and download. So you undo that. We've got the virtual set up already, but that's also then been filled if you haven't like cleared it for a while. And then doing a restart just kind of resets everything.
What did you say? Virtual what?
That's the thing when we hit the Control Alt T or whatever it was, and we put in the swap.
Yeah.
Some of the RAM for memory or whatever we did. That improves it a little bit. But so then but I normally do all of that ahead of time before the show, so we're ready to rock and roll. But this time, the only reason the laptop was even present was to hold the camera. It was just basically a camera stand, and so it wasn't even on for any of it. So yeah, that was fun. But we got taken care of. Thankfully, there was a backup computer. But this does mean that now I have
what's the matter?
2, 3,
so now
4 not working computers and 1 functional Chromebook.
Can you take parts from the non-working computers and swap them into
that's what I was considering. That might.
Can you swap things around?
Maybe.
Because if the card that holds those ports is the thing that's
it's
broken,
all wobbly back there. Even the power cord can like wiggle, and you can see the stuff recessing and moving.
You got to replace some stuff in there.
Yeah, I have a much older computer that I would like to use because the tower is pretty awesome, but I don't know if the power is the same. I don't really know anything about
if things are transferable.
Yeah, but I have other one that I can tear down and try to put the hard drive in, and if that works, because those are somewhat analogous in terms of time and space, that might do it. But yeah, that's gonna be fun projects for tomorrow when I had other stuff over too. But I can try it tomorrow. But I still won't have internet because I have to go and reorder one of those
Wi-Fi USB Wi-Fi thing.
Yeah. Although maybe it does work, and maybe it's just the.
Is there no way to? Do you have any way to cable Ethernet?
No, I'd have to drill holes in walls. I mean, it's a fiber line, so even the Wi-Fi through one of those things and a USB 3 port is plenty.
You're doing great. Good. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, there's no place to direct in, which is what I would normally do.
Yeah.
Anywho, that was the fun antics that started tonight's show.
It was. I think of it. Was it Eric in Alaska who said it was your pre-show slapstick computer repair? Slapstick computer issues.
Well, the weird one was I kept trying to just recover the HDMI, and I switched out a couple of HDMI cables, and none of that worked. So it's the ports. It's all ports. It's ports on the microphone itself. It's ports now on the back of the computer. I have a problem with my portholes. That's all I can say. I'm not good.
Porthole problems.
Porthole problems.
Sorry.
It's gonna be all right. I'll survive.
Yeah. Timid Tenor, there's a YouTube channel called Extra Credit, covered the Spanish flu. Radiolab covered the Spanish flu. Probably a lot of really interesting stories out there. It started, Steve Rain was asking whether the Spanish flu came from a pig farm. Gaurav Sharma was saying it most likely came from Kansas. there's still, from what I've seen, it's very questionable. There are lots of debates as to the exact origins of the 1918 Spanish flu, but they think it's, I think they think it's avian in origin as opposed to pigs. An avian flu. And that had, I don't know, it could be different. It could be more, there could be more different evidence now, but that was one story that I remembered from a ways back. Yeah, really interesting stuff. Yeah, every 100 years, there's a pandemic. I mean, it's a lot of epidemiologists are concerned that with the exponential-ish growth of the human population currently, that since the human population is still growing a lot, it's getting more and more people all over the place, there's greater and greater potential. And especially in situations like we have the massive swine farms and poultry farms, these places where we have mixing of just hundreds, thousands of animals and people. And we also have giant cities, air travel. We're so much more connected now than we've ever been. There's the concern
we have
that
half of our population is in Southeast China.
Right. And
half of the planet's population is in a very dense, interconnected area.
Very dense.
That
very
is
dense
moderate
place.
in climate so that things can persist. They don't have like a sharp cold season that can knock some of these things off the potential chopping block.
Yeah, but I feel like your climate change story, where the flooding is it's gonna go from the 500-year flood once every 500 years to in mid-century once every 140 years to by the end of the century once every 4 years, right? That's rapid increase, and that's the kind of thing that's going to happen with pandemics, where we really need to get infrastructure in place to deal with this kind of stuff, because as long as our populations are growing, we absolutely are going to come face to face with more pandemic causing viruses, and it's not going to be once a century. It's going to be the next thing. It's going to be once every 40 years, then it'll be once every 20 years, and then it's going to happen more and more often unless we put more stopgaps in place, unless we create global systems to manage stuff like this, which we haven't. We have an even more globalized planet than we did 100 years ago. I mean, things are so much more connected now. So many more people.
But that's the quote from Marie Curie in the disclaimer.
Yeah.
You have to do the disclaimer.
Oh, we didn't do it?
Blair
I thought you read it.
I read it, but we should have you do it.
Why?
Hey, Hobo Joe.
I'm sure you did just fine. Yes. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. That's such an awesome quote.
Understand more so that we may fear less. And I think, not just understand more, but plan more. Prepare, plan, and have systems in place to deal with this stuff. Yeah. And I almost used a foul word because I'm just so fed up with humans right now. I love all you humans. Humans are the best.
I was having technical difficulties. Blair, did you flub the disclaimer? The amazing, articulate, beautiful disclaimer that I had prepared for the show. Did you flub it, or did you just nail it like you usually do?
That face.
What? That's like a very...
I read it.
She did not flub it. She did not.
Then we're
she
good.
didn't do it. She did not do a Justin reading of it.
No.
She did a Blair reading. Yeah. Oh, hey Mariposa. So glad to help your mood. Yay. Yeah, Artem is talking about developed countries having less kids, Japan, Europe, and that is something that is so fascinating. I got to do a couple of interviews and talk with people, read a couple books and do some interviews this summer for a couple of different freelance projects I have had, and such interesting stuff out there about predicting where the human population is going to go, like how our populations are going to grow, where they're going to grow the most, and how that's going to affect things like immigration policy, economics, because if you say the United States, which is under replacement right now, so couples are not producing 2.1 children. We're below that level. The level of reproduction is like at 1.7 or something like that. And so it's a negative growth trajectory for the United States. And with that in mind, what's going to happen 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, suddenly we're going to be looking at a declining population, a declining young population, a growing aging population. And so suddenly you don't have enough young, healthy, strong people to support the aging class. You don't have enough young, healthy, strong people to go to work and support the economy. And the aging class needs people to take care of them too.
Yes. So this is when we have to switch.
And so then you need immigration.
No. You need to start culling old people from the society.
No.
No?
Isn't that what they're doing right now with COVID?
Kind of, with policy. Yeah.
Isn't that what the policy is right now with COVID?
Yeah.
There's, if you start thinking really darkly about some of this stuff, and you think about some of the people who are pushing certain ideas forward, and if you think about it from these future-thinking economic perspectives, where the economy is the only thing that's important, right? If you think of it from that perspective, and if somebody is going, well, we need to reduce our aged population, this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, but I don't think so.
My mind goes there. I don't want to believe that, though.
To take that question seriously, what I would have to say is that the Republican administrative body doesn't care about that. It doesn't care about, for the overall society, the economy eventually should get rid of these non-working force individuals. They don't think that far ahead, and it's not individually profitable. Two things. One is they need the wealthy people to maintain their workforce to continue to drive wealth towards the wealth centers. Two, and this is the dark one, there's probably a lot of young wealthy Republicans whose parents have a lot more money than they do. So if somehow they got their inheritance a little earlier than later, so what? Actually, that's a benefit. I mean, I'm sure Trump's kids are like, masks are bad, Pops. Don't wear a mask. Go have another rally.
They're only going to inherit his debt, though, Justin.
Oh, well, yeah, in that case, there is nothing to inherit. Yeah.
But
so then why? Then you just don't care. Then go have fun. Yeah, live your life.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so much when you start thinking about these the multiple levels of complexity of human society. There's a new what news outlet was it?
One thing I'd point out is
there's a new column that I want to start following. This guy is writing about complexity, and his latest article is that humanity has gotten too complex for any one person to understand, like human society on the planet, that through all of the systems and factors that are involved in running all the things that humans do, no one person can understand it all.
I think it's always been that way. But one thing I would say about the population amount of kids people having in different societies, I bet you, and I don't know, so I'm just a bet you, speculating. I bet it's pretty well linked to the cost of housing. I bet you if you look at I bet you that's a huge underlying factor. If you're living in a society where, if you build your house on that plot of land, it's your house, and that's how you do it. And well, nobody's paying for college or going to debt college. There might not be college available, but then what does it matter? Then what's the restriction? Well, then there really isn't. Another mouth to feed is just another mouth to feed, and if it's rice and beans, then it's no big deal. When we get to the point where everyone is leveraging everything that they have just to participate in society, then that other mouth to feed becomes an extreme expense. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is just simple economics. I think in maybe in a little bit more of an equitably well-distributed society in the United States, we would have a positive population growth. Who knows? Although that doesn't seem to be true in a lot of
socialist societies. It's not true. Socialist societies, it's the same. Around the world, the more developed the country is, the more educated women are, the more choice that women have. So family planning being available and options for family planning, birth control, etc. The more that choice is put into female hands and women are educated, and the wealthier countries become, the fewer children they have.
This is why educating women was ranked so high in Project Drawdown.
Yes.
Is because it's a direct impact on population growth.
Yep, direct impact. Mm-hmm.
Pretty much the best thing you can do for climate change is make less humans.
And I think it also leads to more education, less war, less conflict within a society.
Yeah. So there were a bunch of very specific things relating to women's issues in the book, but if you look at kind of the overarching thing, empowering women is kind of the phrase that they used, or women's issues, or I think it was empowering women, was like cumulatively the number one actual impact on climate change. But it's because you were adding all those. You were talking about access to healthcare and education and putting women in power in politics, local government, stuff like that. Like when you add all those things together, then it becomes this massive force. But specifically just access to and knowledge of birth control is like
Daniel in the chat room is saying families used to be like 15 per.
So you had extras.
Actually, if you go back, if you go back, when I did my family ancestry stuff, there was like a lot of 8s and 9s back there, kids, but it was a numbers game. In fact, this is a fun, quick story. The only reason I'm here is thanks to a Catholic priest. Because my grandparents had only one child, who was my uncle, and he died at 16. And my grandmother was obviously distraught. My grandfather consulted the priest and was like, "What should I do?" And the priest is like, "You had one kid?
What?
Have 3 more children, and I guarantee you at least one of them will survive for her to pay attention." And so my father was the third of those 3 children. Took very specifically took the exact advice. But that was, they had too small of a family for the numbers game of the back in the day. And if you looked too, that's the other thing. If you do that ancestry thing and you see like, oh wow, my great had like 9 kids, and then you track them and you're like, hey, whoa, I can only find 5 of them. I can only see where 5 of them ended up. It may be because.
My great grandmother on my mom's side was. Oh gosh, I might mess it up. I think she was the youngest of 12. She might have been the second to youngest of 12, but she was the first one born in the United States.
Oh, cool.
So so they all kind of piled in and crossed the ocean, and I guess her mom was pregnant at the time, so she popped out on the other side.
I remember crossing oceans.
Yeah.
Those are the days.
Remember that?
Those are the days.
I mean,
when we
but
crossed
I think every
oceans.
time you did it, it was for fun, as opposed to my great grandmother's family, who they were doing it to run away from the Russian Cossacks who were burning down their villages. So, just a little bit
I don't
different.
know. It was during the Trump administration for a lot of it, and the Bush administration for the other part of it. I don't know. I feel like I might have been escaping too. Yes,
Could have
I'm
been,
sorry. For
just a
those
little.
who find me too political, I came to science without my politics in mind, and then found them to be completely political by accident.
Your science to be political.
No, I found that politics. It's not that I came to science. Just looking at science and doing these science stories and being like, I'm going to put a political slant on every scientific issue.
Yeah,
It's that
it just fits.
there's a political resistance to the knowledge that science has given the planet, and it almost entirely seems to be from one part. I almost feel like we should warn the world, like, hey, world, we have a problem. We have Republicans. They don't believe facts or reality, and they're trying to construct the most powerful nation on this planet based around things that aren't true or real. Beware, because it's going to be a problem at some point.
Total problem.
I mean, that's like the whole thing where people coming out and saying like, "Oh, I prefer not to get political. I want to keep things separate," right? And it's the thing is that comes from a place of privilege, and not getting political comes from a place of privilege because you don't have as much to lose by staying out of the fight, right? And similarly, as scientists, I wish it wasn't this way, but unfortunately, we have been dragged into the fight because science has become a political issue.
I mean,
But
if we're
it's always
talking
been-
about
it's always been, though.
dinosaurs, if we're talking about dinosaurs, we're talking about dinosaurs, and I don't mean the old people in Congress, but if we're talking about something like climate change, that is something that there needs to be policy. If we're talking about water, there's policy that surrounds that. Agriculture, there's policy that surrounds that.
I would disagree with you
how
slightly
we
to say that
how
when we talk
interact
about
socially, it's politics.
yeah, but when we talk, but it's also politics when we've talked about dinosaurs. I mean, we like to think that that's not a thing that's on the table, but it is.
The money that goes to different places, and
No, there's a 6,000-year Earth policy-setting agenda within politics that wants to change textbooks, that wants to remove evolution from textbooks. I mean,
You're
there
right.
is
You
almost
are absolutely
nothing
right.
that politics can't touch. And when you have this combination in the weird way that it's happened in this country, you have one political party who's almost a collection of people who want to refute facts. Different facts. They're a correlation of fact deniers, but they are all together in a very powerful party to where now something along the lines of 30-40% of Republican supporters believe this election was stolen. Some of them, 33% or so, still believe right now, based on polling, that Donald Trump will be inaugurated. This is a dangerous double world. You know what's funny too? If you reverse the Mary Curry quote, which I gotta go look up because I can't remember what it was again. Nothing in life is to be feared; it is only to be understood. If you reverse that, nothing in life is to be understood; it is only to be feared. You have the basis for the Fox News Network and the Republican agenda. That's it. Don't understand anything. Just be afraid of it all. That's the messaging. It's absolutely
fear
the
first
core
action.
reverse of what science has been producing. over these many decades.
Well, and I think that, you know, the other part of this is that I'm sure that you could find areas of science that people would pretty universally agree on, but I think that in and of itself is the issue, right? Is that like the science education side of things and the understanding of science as an institution, and how the same science that gives you your weather report also gives you climate change data, is the part that's missing. The same science that brought us to the moon, and you want us to go back to the moon, helped create the foundation of, again, climate change data and other things that we do, right? That is then refuted. So I think that's the other part that I struggle with is you can try to find common ground all you want, but science has fundamentally become a political issue because the nuts and bolts behind it are being attacked.
Yeah. It's an absolute illusion that there's common ground. The reason there's has been Republican push and support to go back to the moon is to divert the entire NASA budget away from monitoring climate change. No, that's not that. I'm not even making that. That was Ted Cruz, and they brought in Buzz Aldrin to be like, yeah, we got to focus on space missions. But what they were attempting to do at the time was convert the entire NASA budget to space exploration, meaning they were going to eliminate all global monitoring at the same time. There's an illusion of coalition even at the basis of the context of the conversations that we attempt to engage in, because they don't care. That's why they don't care about, like, well, if we could remove some of the population. It's not that. They weren't even actually, there was an entire conversation that was taking place that the coronavirus was only attacking blue states. This was a conversation that took
I heard
place.
about
and
it.
Yeah. So, I feel like we got to warn the rest of the world. We have a problem. Coronavirus, but there's something worse that you're seeing. The coronavirus is the symptom of the problem that's taking place in America. It's just a symptom. The alternate reality, by the way, it's a good thing Hillary didn't win.
Yeah,
because we would be looking at a red wave because, oh my gosh, they locked down the government's forcing you to stay inside because of this hoax, and at the same time, even though it's a hoax, 20,000 people have died.
I mean, you can say it's
and it would have been the worst conspiracy catastrophe of leadership ever. 250,000 people are dead, and they don't give a word that I won't say right now. They don't give a shirt. They won't.
I don't know if they'll get the vaccine later, and that's another problem as well, because we need people to take the vaccine so that we can get to a point where we can all have more normal lives again.
So this, I mean, and you know, this is the part that really bothers me. I mean, one of the things that bothers me about politics and COVID in general is that, sure, in this other scenario, potentially Hillary wins, they do a proper shutdown. But I also... But
still 20,000 people die, and it's the end of the world politically.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Which, you know, good for the 240 that aren't dead, by the way. Mm-hmm. But anyway...
We're voting Republican because they're like, this was all a hoax.
Yeah. No, but I unfortunately don't have a lot of faith that any politician would be the bad guy and do it. I don't, you know, usually I'm pretty optimistic about these sorts of things, but but there's a big part of me that feels like because of this idea of being a politician is being your career. You're going to ruin your career, right? This is like the thing that bothers me about this is that if you're just doing a term and then you're going to go back to being a doctor or a school teacher or whatever it is that you do.
A lawyer. A lawyer. It's always a lawyer. It's almost always a lawyer.
That's what I'm saying is we're talking about this other scenario where politicians aren't career jobs, right? So then you go into your space, you do what's best for the country and for the populace. And if people hate you afterwards, oh, well, you did the right thing. This is the part that I feel like I hesitate about and I get concerned about is that, like, Ultimately, would anyone in our current political system make the tough decision and be the bad guy who ruined Christmas? That's my question.
So here's why I tend to vote Democrat, even though I'm far left of the libs, the Dems, the Democratic Party. I'm left of them. Even Bernie Sanders, I'm like, well, that's kind of a little far to the right for me, but I'm still there. All right. The reason I do would continue to entrust them, at least in the national level of leaderships, is because they don't tend to make their own decisions in that seat of power. They have an expert who is actually studied and trained in the whatever. Under Obama, we had a nuclear scientist was the head of the Department of Energy. We've had oil people in charge of it under Republican administrations. That's a vast difference, having a nuclear scientist versus somebody who is a corporate tool in those positions.
Yeah,
you have somebody who's the head of the CDC who has studied pathology. You have somebody... So I can picture, at least, maybe it didn't plan out this way in the alternate universe, where somebody who has been studying pathologies and pandemic response and this sort of thing sees what's happening with COVID and orders a 2-month shutdown and says, just put out the money, pay everybody, nobody leaves, we knock it down, and we're going to do tracing. I can see that as a reality versus somebody who decides, I'm going to make a policy decision on my own because I feel like I'm qualified. If you're making up facts in your head, you're qualified to do anything, right? But if you're relying on an expert to be the bad guy that you're talking about in this scenario and saying, my hands are tied, I have an expert who has CDC and the World Health Organization have advised this, so this is what we will do. You're an administrator of government as opposed to being somebody who's going to, shoot from the gut. Go with your instinct. Make it up it as you go along. It's just ridiculous what we see.
I'd like to have a government filled with people who know what they're doing, who are professionals in their fields, who are very experienced and skilled. Yeah. I would like to get back to that.
I still don't think anyone's going to shut the country fully down.
No, and I think you're right, and I think
which is
it
what
doesn't
needs to
matter.
happen.
It doesn't matter which party, any of the parties. You're right, Blair. The politicians are politicians at this point.
It does matter. It does matter. If the last 4 years
politicians
has taught us nothing,
politicians are politicians, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and they're more worried about their reputation than they are about anything else. And it's why things don't get done that need to get done. And it's a sad state of affairs, is what I'm saying. Is that we are. What we want it the way we want it to work is not the way that it is working. And the things that we know should get done are not the things that necessarily will get done. Yeah, I don't know. In the chat room, I'm also looking at people. Someone made a comment about Democrats, and I honestly believe that you mentioned, and I've seen this before, people calling the Dems the libs, but that's not. There's the progressives, there's the libs, there's whatever, the Democrats. It's like they're all different groups. But I feel like the Democratic Party of today is the same thing as the Republican Party of the 1980s.
Yep.
Like it is effectively the things that they want to do they are effectively the fiscal conservative Republicans of the 1980s.
Totally.
And so I'm like, why we need another party, because this Democratic Party is not the party. We've got the Republicans who are in Crazy Town. We have Republicans who now are voting Democrat because now that's Republicans. And we've got the progressives who are kind of like the liberals of the 80s, and it's all messed up. Nobody is in the right party anymore because all the goalposts have shifted.
Yeah, well, it's because the Republicans moved so far right. Every time they stepped right, the Democrats were like, "Oh, we'll meet you halfway.
We'll meet.
And
We'll go to the. We'll be in the center.
And
We're
then
in the
the
center.
Republicans step right, and then the Democrats go, "We'll meet you halfway." And before
Yeah,
you know
and-
it, you're so far to the right of where you started because they're not moving in the other direction.
You're not coming back the other way, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Democratic leadership sucks. You know, they've
totally
they've
does. I'm
they've
not
already
happy
been
with
blaming
it.
like, oh, we would have done better on all of these other races, all of these like down
no.
ticket races if we just didn't have defund the police is one of the things. Except that
is not
everyone
what
who
did it.
actually ran behind defund the police won.
Right.
And those who backed away from it didn't. But
Not
their
just,
their
it
take
wasn't-
is
it
like,
wasn't-
we still need to move to the middle of what's the middle of Trump?
But it wasn't
What's
even
the
it
middle
wasn't
of
even
ground of that
defund the police.
administration?
It was healthcare. It was Medicare for all. It was the
That was the blue
candidates.
wave. That was the blue
Yeah.
wave. I'm talking about the current one that we failed. Is that you did not take the progressive take, which is where the country is,
That's
where
where
the
people want it to
majority
go.
of the people is. There is a majority. It is left of liberal, and the Republicans are going to keep.
But
feeding
isn't
fear.
liberal? Like I'm
No.
very confused about how I used to be liberal and now I'm not anymore. I
No,
am
you're left of
very
liberal. It's-
confused.
Yeah. It's
Because I call
liberal-
myself liberal and then people are like, "No, you're not liberal." And I'm like, "I thought I was liberal." Liberal means like I'm liberal. I put lots of butter on my toast. Come on.
8:48, Daniel. Yeah, and we did go from a Nobel-winning Stephen Chu nuclear physicist to a guy who couldn't remember the branches of government in a presidential debate. That was the transition last time. So, like, my one thing that, my one trust in that weird from Washington mentality is that I trust that Democratic leadership on the national level will listen more and lead less.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
been
hope
the
that
pattern over
eventually we
time.
can step a little bit more left and there'll be more, more science guiding policy. There'll be more experts involved in decisions and not just lobbyists. I don't know. Science is political, and that's where this all came from. And so
Silence
much.
comes from privilege is what this is all about. Again, I will reiterate that that was the whole thing about, the Black Lives Matter movement back in June, right? Was saying if you don't feel compelled to speak right now and you think you can wait, and not chime into this discussion, that means that you have privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's something to keep in mind is if people are mad and you're not, there's a chance that that's because it's not always.
You
but
haven't
yeah.
seen the problems.
Yeah,
and that
you haven't
is-
seen it. You're
Yeah.
missing a point of view, and it's worth looking at because, yeah, if you're like, well, I don't actually think that's that big of a problem, but this huge group of people think it's a problem, it might be time to put on a different set of glasses,
Yeah. There was a story this last week that was suggesting, and was it based on Thailand? But there was a story this week that was saying that was positing that the stronger your democracy is, the weaker your police are.
Oh.
And that
Interesting.
and I think that is, and in terms of weaker, it doesn't mean unable to help people. Like the police are there to support the people, and so the police should be able to help people in situations. But that in terms of being able to go out and demonstrate, protest against your government, and march and do things, then if your police are weaker from a militarization standpoint, then actually your democracy is doing a lot better from a democratic standpoint, which I actually thought it was a very interesting statement. So
Yeah.
on that,
A town of 200 people in Oklahoma doesn't need a military tank, It's
But I bought it on eBay, says the police chief.
yeah.
The Sagan Party, balancing science and the environment. I like that. That's good. It's great. And yes, Portland is one of the most liberal havens of the Pacific Northwest, for sure. It's 11:30. I think it's time to head
It's
out.
time for bed.
It's time for bed.
Say goodnight, Blair.
Good night, Blair.
Yeah.
Say good night, Justin.
Good night, Justin. Good night. Kiki.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining for another episode of This Week in Science and for this after show conversation that ended up going places. That's what the after show is all about. Looking forward to coming back again next week with another episode. Let me know if you want me to schedule any interviews for things. If you're looking forward to people, send me emails. Let me know what you would like. I need to start planning more interviews. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. Be safe. Wear a freaking mask.